Hey guys. Here is what if Naruto could pause time. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1. The First Breath of Eternity. The October wind carried the scent of dying leaves and distant bonfires as Uzumaki Naruto pressed his back against the cold alley wall, his chest heaving with the ragged breaths of a hunted animal. He was 7 years old, and he had learned long ago that the village celebrated this particular night with a fervor that made him invisible to kindness but painfully visible to cruelty. The footsteps were getting closer. 3 of them, maybe 4. Naruto had become adept at counting footfalls in the darkness, a survival skill no child should possess, earned through repetition that had carved grooves into his young psyche like water wearing through stone. He pressed a dirty palm over his mouth to muffle his breathing, his other hand clutching a torn paper bag that had once contained his dinner, 2 rice balls purchased from the only vendor who would sell to him, now scattered somewhere on the main street where he dropped them while running. Saw him duck in here. A voice growled from the mouth of the alley. Little demon can't have gotten far. Naruto's stomach clenched. Demon. He'd heard the word so many times it had lost its meaning, becoming instead a simple fact of existence, like his blonde hair, like his blue eyes, like the strange whisker marks on his cheeks that no amount of scrubbing could remove. He was a demon. Everyone said so. The logic was circular and complete, requiring no further evidence than its own assertion. Just leave it alone, Takeshi. Another voice said, this one carrying the slurred edge of sake consumption. The Anbu will. The Anbu don't care about teaching this thing a lesson. Not tonight. Not when everyone's too busy mourning what it did to even notice. What it did. Naruto had never understood what he had done. He'd been born on this day 7 years ago, October 10th, the anniversary of the Kyuubi attack. But he'd been a baby. Babies couldn't destroy villages. Babies couldn't kill the 4th Hokage. The accusation made no sense, but sense had never been a requirement for the villagers' hatred. The footsteps entered the alley. Moonlight caught the silhouette of the first man, broad-shouldered, carrying something in his right hand that glinted with cold purpose. A bottle, perhaps, or worse. Naruto had learned to identify improvised weapons by their shadows. Bottles broke into jagged edges, wooden planks left splinters that festered, and metal pipes. He didn't want to think about metal pipes. There you are. The man's smile was visible even in the darkness, a slash of teeth that held no warmth. Behind him, 2 others materialized from the gloom. A thin man with a nervous twitch in his left eye and a heavy-set figure who moved with the dangerous stability of someone who had consumed just enough alcohol to dull their conscience, but not their coordination. Naruto bolted. He made it perhaps 3 steps before the thin man's hand closed around the collar of his jacket, that hideous orange jacket he picked from a donation bin, the only piece of clothing that had been left unclaimed because no one else wanted something so bright, so attention-drawing, so impossibly loud. The fabric bunched and tore as Naruto was yanked backward, his feet leaving the ground for a sickening moment before he crashed into the alley's debris-strewn floor. Pain exploded through his right elbow as it struck stone. His vision swam with tears he refused to let fall. Tears were weakness, and weakness invited worse treatment. He'd learned that lesson early. Thought you could run? The broad-shouldered man, Takeshi, crouched down, bringing his face close enough that Naruto could smell the alcohol on his breath, the hatred in his narrowed eyes. Where would you even go? Whole village wants you dead, demon. Only reason you're still breathing is because the 3rd's gone soft in his old age. I didn't do anything, Naruto whispered. It was a familiar protest, one smoothed by repetition like a river stone. I never. The first blow caught him across the cheek, snapping his head to the side and filling his mouth with the copper taste of blood. He'd bitten his tongue. The pain was sharp but manageable. He'd had worse, would likely have worse again, but it was the casualness of the violence that always shocked him. The ease with which these people, these ordinary villagers with jobs and families and lives that had nothing to do with him, could raise their hands against the child. Don't talk, Takeshi spat. Demons don't get to talk. The second blow came to his stomach, driving the air from his lungs and folding him in half like a paper crane being crushed. Naruto gasped, tried to curl into a protective ball, but hands grabbed his arms and pinned him flat against the cold ground. He could feel stones pressing into his back through his thin jacket. Could feel his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for escape. Please, he thought, though he didn't know who he was begging. The 3rd Hokage was far away in his tower. The Anbu who supposedly watched him had never once intervened. The villagers who might object were too busy with their memorial lanterns and their sake, and their grief that had calcified into something ugly over 7 long years. Please. Someone. Anyone. The bottle. Because it was a bottle, Naruto could see that now as Takashi raised it against the moonlight, reached its apex. And then the world stopped. The bottle hung suspended in the air, frozen mid-swing. The men's faces were locked in expressions of rage and anticipation, their muscles rigid, their eyes unblinking. The wind had ceased. The distant sounds of celebration had vanished. Even the dust motes, floating through the shaft of moonlight, were motionless, suspended like tiny stars caught in amber. Naruto gasped, and the sound was impossibly loud in the absolute silence, as if he'd shouted in a library that stretched to infinity. He scrambled backward on his elbows, expecting the hands on his arms to tighten, expecting the violence to resume, but there was nothing. The men remained frozen. The world remained still. He stood on shaky legs, his entire body trembling with a cocktail of fear and confusion and something that felt like power, though he had no framework to understand it. His head was beginning to throb, a dull ache behind his eyes that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. He pressed his palm to his temple and stared at the tableau before him, 3 grown men, frozen in the act of hurting a child, helpless now in their own stillness. What is this? He reached out with a trembling hand toward Takashi's frozen face, watching his own fingers inch closer to the man's stubbled cheek. Crack. The world lurched. Sound flooded back in a cacophonous wave, the distant thunder of fireworks, the murmur of crowds, the wind rustling through autumn leaves. The men stumbled forward, their momentum suddenly released, and the bottle completed its arc, striking empty air where Naruto's head had been a moment before. What the? Takashi spun, wild-eyed, finding Naruto somehow standing 3 feet behind them. How did you? But Naruto was already running. He didn't understand what had happened. Didn't understand how he'd moved without the others moving, how the world had stopped and started at his desperate plea. All he knew was that his legs were carrying him through the maze of Konoha's back alleys, that his lungs were burning with exertion, and that his head was pounding with an agony that eclipsed even the bruise forming on his cheek. He ran until he couldn't run anymore, until his legs gave out and he collapsed behind a shrine to some long-forgotten deity at the edge of the residential district. The stone steps were cold against his back as he slumped against them, his breath coming in great heaving gulps, his vision swimming at the edges. The headache was getting worse. It had started as a dull throb but was escalating rapidly, a migraine that felt like someone was driving heated needles into his skull from the inside. Naruto whimpered, curling into a ball, pressing his hands against his temples as if physical pressure could contain the pain. What happened to me? What did I do? He remembered the desperate plea, the certainty that the bottle would connect, the terrible resignation of a child who had learned to expect nothing but pain. And then, stillness. Impossible, perfect stillness. Had he imagined it? The pain suggested otherwise. You didn't imagine migraines that felt like your brain was trying to escape through your eye sockets. You didn't imagine the bone-deep exhaustion that was settling into his limbs like lead weights. Something had happened in that alley, something real, something unprecedented, and whatever it was, it had cost him dearly. Naruto lay there for a long time, shivering in the October cold, too tired and too hurt to move. Above him, the sky was alight with memorial lanterns, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, rising into the darkness like the souls of the departed ascending to whatever peace awaited beyond the veil. Each one represented someone lost to the QB 7 years ago. Each one was a silent accusation against the boy who bore the blame for their deaths. He watched them until his eyes grew heavy, until the pain in his head faded to a manageable ache, until consciousness slipped away like water through cupped hands. His last thought before sleep claimed him was a question that would echo through the months and years to come. What am I? Chapter 2, Empirical Evidence. 3 days passed before Naruto worked up the courage to try again. The migraine had persisted for nearly 48 hours after the incident, a throbbing, nauseating presence behind his eyes that made even the dim light of his cramped apartment feel like knives being driven into his skull. He'd missed 2 days of academy classes, though he doubted anyone had noticed or cared. The instructors rarely called on him. The other students avoided him like a disease. His absence was probably a relief to everyone involved. But as the pain receded and his strength returned, so too did his curiosity. Something extraordinary had happened in that alley, something that defied everything he understood about the world. And while Naruto wasn't the brightest student at the academy, his grades were a disaster, his attention span almost non-existent during lectures, he possessed something far more valuable for this particular investigation: absolute, unshakable determination. He started small. Sitting on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by the detritus of instant ramen cups and abandoned homework assignments, Naruto closed his eyes and tried to remember what he'd felt in that moment. The fear had been overwhelming, certainly, the primal terror of a small animal cornered by predators. But there had been something else. A reaching. A desperate grasping for anything that might save him. And he'd felt something respond. It was hard to articulate, even in his own thoughts. The closest comparison he could manage was the sensation of molding chakra, that tingling warmth that spread through his body during the rare occasions when academy exercises actually worked for him. But this had been different. As if he'd reached past the surface layer of chakra that every ninja used and found something more fundamental beneath. He focused on that memory, trying to recreate the reaching, the grasping, the desperate need. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto's eyes flew open, and he found himself surrounded by perfect stillness once again. The dust motes hung motionless in the beam of afternoon sunlight that streamed through his grimy window. A fly that had been buzzing near his ceiling was suspended mid-flight, its wings crystallized in the act of beating. The distant sounds of the village, cartwheels on cobblestones, children's laughter, vendors hawking their wares, had vanished, replaced by a silence so complete it pressed against his eardrums like physical weight. It worked, he breathed, and his voice was small and flat in the dead air. It actually worked. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the immediate spike of discomfort in his head, not a full migraine, not yet, but the promise of one lurking at the edges of his consciousness. How long did he have? In the alley it had felt like seconds before the world snapped back into motion. He needed to figure out the limits. Naruto began counting. 1, 2, thr. Crack. Sound rushed back. The fly resumed its buzzing circuit. The distant village noises returned to their familiar background hum. 3 seconds. He had 3 seconds of frozen time before reality reasserted itself. The headache arrived almost immediately, a sharp, stabbing pain that made him wince and press his palm against his forehead. Not as severe as the first time, but bad enough that he had to sit down again, had to close his eyes and breathe through the nausea that accompanied it. 3 seconds, he thought, turning the number over in his mind. 3 seconds in a migraine that feels like my brain is being squeezed through a sieve. It wasn't much. What could you accomplish in 3 seconds? Not much in a fight. Maybe dodge a single attack, reposition slightly, avoid one blow before time resumed and you were right back where you started. And the price? The price was a headache bad enough to make concentration nearly impossible. But it was something. For the first time in his 7 years of existence, Naruto possessed something that no one could take from him. Something unique. Something powerful, even if that power was currently limited to the point of near uselessness. He lay on his back on the floor, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and smiled despite the pain. 3 seconds, he said to himself. That's where we start. Over the following weeks, Naruto conducted a methodical investigation into his newfound ability, though methodical might have been too generous a term for what was essentially a combination of reckless experimentation and stubborn repetition. He learned several things through painful trial and error. First, the ability was definitely connected to chakra. This became apparent when he tried to use it after exhausting himself with academy exercises. The reaching, the grasping at that deeper level, simply wouldn't connect when his chakra reserves were depleted. It was like trying to grip a rope with numb fingers. He could feel where the ability should be, but couldn't actually grasp it. Second, the duration was consistent. Every activation gave him exactly 3 seconds of frozen time, no more and no less. He'd counted dozens of times, timed it against his heartbeat, which still functioned in the stillness, though it felt strange, isolated, as if his body had become its own contained universe, and the result was always the same. Third, he could move objects while time was frozen, but there were limitations. Small things, pebbles, pencils, loose papers, could be shifted with some effort, though they felt strangely heavy, as if the stillness itself was a medium that resisted movement. Larger objects were more difficult. Trying to push a chair was like pushing through thick mud, requiring effort disproportionate to the object's actual weight. And trying to move a person, he tested that once, attempting to reposition a frozen bird that had landed on his windowsill. The moment his hand made contact, time had snapped back into motion, the 3 seconds collapsing into less than 1. Fourth, and most importantly, the migraines were getting less severe. It wasn't a dramatic improvement. Each use still left him with a throbbing head and a faint sense of nausea, but the incapacitating agony of his first activation had faded to something merely uncomfortable. His body was adapting, whatever internal mechanism produced this ability slowly calibrating itself to handle the strain. This discovery sparked a theory in Naruto's mind. If his body could adapt to the pain, could it also adapt to the limitations? He began to push. Every morning before academy, he would activate the ability once. Every evening after returning home, he would activate it again. The migraines became a constant presence in his life, a low-grade throb that never quite disappeared, but he refused to stop. If 3 seconds could become 4, if 4 could become 5, if the potential was there to grow this ability into something meaningful. Naruto had never been good at academics. His attention wandered during lectures. His calligraphy was atrocious. His understanding of chakra theory was surface level at best. But he understood training. He understood pushing through pain and exhaustion because the alternative was stagnation, was being left behind, was remaining the dead last that everyone expected him to be. So he trained. And slowly, incrementally, the seconds began to accumulate. Chapter 3: The Weight of Stillness. 2 months after his discovery, on a gray December morning that promised snow but delivered only bitter cold, Uzumaki Naruto achieved 4 seconds of frozen time. He was sitting in his usual seat at the back of the academy classroom, ostensibly paying attention to Iruka-sensei's lecture on the fundamental principles of genjutsu theory. In reality, he was watching the clock on the wall, tracking the movement of its second hand with an intensity that might have been mistaken for actual academic interest by anyone unfamiliar with his character. The classroom was full. 28 students occupied the tiered rows of desks, ranging from the eagerly attentive Sakura, her hand perpetually raised, to the barely conscious Shikamaru, drooling onto his notes in the row ahead of Naruto. At the front, Iruka-sensei spoke with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed in the importance of his subject, a quality that Naruto appreciated even if he couldn't always match it. Genjutsu operates on a fundamentally different principle than ninjutsu, Iruka was explaining, his scarred face animated with pedagogical fervor. When ninjutsu manipulates external chakra to produce physical effects, genjutsu infiltrates the target's chakra network to disrupt their perception of reality. The key to defending against genjutsu lies in recognizing when your perceptions have been compromised. Naruto stopped listening. It wasn't intentional. His mind simply drifted, as it always did when theory became too abstract. He found himself wondering what the classroom would look like frozen. Whether the stillness would affect Iruka's voice mid-word, creating a strange, truncated silence. Whether the dust motes in the beam of winter sunlight streaming through the window would hang suspended like tiny constellations. Before he could stop himself, he reached for that deeper layer. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto blinked, then immediately cursed under his breath, a habit he'd picked up from eavesdropping on construction workers near his apartment. He hadn't meant to activate it here, surrounded by people, in a space where someone might notice something strange. But no one could notice, could they? That was the point. Time was frozen. He was the only thing in the entire classroom, the entire village, the entire world, that was still moving. He stood up quickly from his desk, the motion feeling strange and heavy in the stillness, and walked to the front of the classroom. Iruka was frozen mid-gesture, his right hand raised to emphasize some point about chakra network disruption. His mouth was partially open, caught between syllables. There was chalk dust on his fingers and a small stain on his chunin vest that looked like soy sauce. Naruto studied his teacher's face, noting details he never had the chance to observe before. The scar across Iruka's nose was actually 2 scars, he realized, parallel lines that had likely been made by the same weapon, separated by perhaps a centimeter. There were faint shadows under his eyes that suggested insufficient sleep. A single gray hair had sprouted near his left temple, standing out against the brown like a thin silver wire. "You're tired," Naruto said to the frozen man. "And you're getting old. But you still come here every day and try to teach us stuff, even when half of us aren't listening." The words felt strange in the dead air, falling flat without echoes. Naruto glanced at the clock on the wall, its second hand motionless, and began counting. 1, 2, 3. He tensed, expecting the world to resume. 4. Wait. 4? Crack. While Naruto realizing he had not returned to his seat yet. The sound returned. Motion returned. Iruka completed his gesture and his sentence without any awareness that Naruto had moved, that time had stopped, that anything unusual had occurred. But Naruto was no longer in his seat. He was standing at the front of the classroom, directly in front of Iruka's desk, staring at his teacher with an expression of stunned delight. The room went silent. 27 students turned to stare at him. Iruka's eyes widened, his lecture forgotten, his mouth still forming the shape of a word that had lost all relevance. "Naruto," Iruka said slowly, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man confronted with something inexplicable. Weren't you just sitting at your desk?" Naruto's mind raced. He hadn't thought this through. Of course he hadn't meant to activate the ability at all, and certainly hadn't considered what would happen when he reappeared somewhere unexpected. The 3 seconds of his previous uses had never given him enough time to move far enough for the displacement to be noticeable. But 4 seconds had. He searched desperately for an explanation that wouldn't require him to reveal what he'd done. The body flicker technique? It was a terrible lie. The body flicker was a D-rank technique that Academy students didn't learn until their final year, and it was accompanied by distinctive visual effects, swirling leaves or a brief blur of motion. Naruto's displacement had been instantaneous and invisible. Iruka's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. "The body flicker doesn't work like that, Naruto." You didn't use any hand seals, and there was no chakra surge that I could sense. How did you? Maybe it was a kawarimi? Someone suggested from the back. Shikamaru, of all people, roused from his nap by the commotion. A substitution with air or something? You can't substitute with air, Iruka said absently, his eyes never leaving Naruto's face. Kawarimi requires a physical object of similar mass. The classroom buzzed with whispered speculation. Naruto could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on him, could see the mixture of curiosity and suspicion on their faces. He needed to defuse this situation before it escalated, before someone decided that the demon child's strange new ability warranted investigation by people with more authority than a classroom full of students. I was just practicing, he said, forcing his voice into its usual loud, brash register. Working on my awesome ninja skills. You know, the kind that are gonna make me Hokage someday. It was deliberate. The declaration of his Hokage ambition, absurd, laughable, the punchline to a joke everyone had heard 1,000 times, served its purpose perfectly. The tension in the room dissolved into familiar mockery, snorts of derision, rolled eyes and muttered comments about delusional deadlasts who couldn't even master the basic clone technique. Even Iruka's expression softened, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Whatever you did, Naruto, it's not appropriate to practice techniques during class. Return to your seat. Sure thing, Iruka-sensei. Naruto bounded back to his desk with exaggerated enthusiasm, playing up the role of the class clown that everyone expected. But inside, his heart was racing with something that felt dangerously like hope. 4 seconds. He'd done it. And if he could go from 3 to 4, then surely he could go from 4 to 5, from 5 to 6, from 6 to, however high the limit extended. The migraine was already building behind his eyes, that familiar pressure that had become an almost constant companion over the past 2 months. But for once, Naruto welcomed the pain. It was proof. It was evidence. It was the price of progress, and he would pay it gladly. One day, he thought as Iruka resumed his lecture and the class settled back into its normal rhythms, I'm going to figure out exactly what this ability can do. And when I do... He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The smile on his face said everything. Chapter 4, The Third Suspicion. News of the incident in Iruka's classroom reached the Hokage's office before the day was out. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage and the man who had shepherded Konoha through 2 world wars and 1 catastrophic demon attack, sat behind his desk and listened to his Anbu operative's report with an expression of carefully cultivated neutrality. The mask of the monkey watched from the shadows near the window, its owner's voice flat and professional as he recounted what had transpired. The displacement was instantaneous, the Anbu said. One moment the subject was seated at his desk, the next, he was standing at the front of the classroom. No hand seals were observed. No chakra expenditure was detected by any of the sensors present in the building. The only anomaly was a brief spike in the subject's biometric readings approximately 3 seconds before his reappearance, increased heart rate and a subtle fluctuation in his chakra signature. Hiruzen drew on his pipe, savoring the rich tobacco smoke as he considered this information. Your assessment? Unknown technique, likely instinctive. The subject appeared as surprised by his displacement as the rest of the classroom, which suggests he did not deliberately trigger the effect. However, his subsequent behavior, the immediate deflection using his Hokage persona, indicates he understood the need to downplay the incident. You believe he's aware of what he did? I believe he's aware that he did something, Hokage-sama. Whether he understands the nature or mechanism of that something is unclear. Hiruzen nodded slowly, his aged eyes distant with contemplation. Uzumaki Naruto. The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The child he had failed in countless small ways over the past 7 years, failed to protect from the villagers' hatred, failed to provide with meaningful support or guidance, failed to give what he had promised Minato he would give. And now the boy was manifesting unexplained abilities that had no precedent in Konoha's extensive records. The Kyuubi, Hiruzen murmured, more to himself than to the Anbu. Could this be the fox's influence? Unknown, sir. The subject seal shows no signs of degradation, and the chakra fluctuation we detected did not match the Kyuubi's signature. But we have limited data on how the Ninetales' presence might affect a Jinchuriki's development over time. Indeed we do. Hiruzen set down his pipe and rose from his desk, moving to the window that overlooked the village. From this vantage point, he could see the academy building, a modest structure of wood and stone that housed the future of Konoha's shinobi forces. Somewhere in that building, a blond-haired boy with whisker marks on his cheeks was going about his day, unaware that his every move was being scrutinized by forces far beyond his comprehension. Or perhaps not so unaware. The boy's deflection had been clever. Too clever for someone who was supposedly the dead last of his class. Increase surveillance, Hiruzen ordered. But do so subtly. Naruto has already endured enough suspicion from the village. I won't have him feeling hunted by his own protectors. If he manifests this ability again, I want to know immediately. And if there's any sign that the QB's seal is weakening. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The Anbu understood perfectly. Understood, Hokage-sama. The operative vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving Hiruzen alone with his thoughts, and the weight of his responsibilities. Minato, he thought, gazing out at the village his predecessor had died to protect. What would you make of this? Your son, developing abilities that no one can explain. Is this your legacy? The questions had no answers. They never did, when Naruto was concerned. Hiruzen returned to his desk and his paperwork, pushing the matter to the back of his mind. He had a village to run, treaties to negotiate, threats to assess. One boy's mysterious abilities, however intriguing, could not monopolize his attention. But he made a mental note to visit the academy soon. To see Naruto in person. To look into those blue eyes and search for any sign of the power that was beginning to stir within him. Whatever was happening to Uzumaki Naruto, Hiruzen intended to understand it before it grew beyond anyone's ability to control. Chapter 5: Trial and Error. The winter deepened, and Naruto deepened with it. He had become obsessive in his training, pushing his ability every day without fail regardless of the consequences. The migraines had stabilized into a constant low-grade presence, manageable, if unpleasant, and the duration of his frozen time had crept upward with excruciating slowness. 4 seconds became 4.5. 4.5 became 5. Each increment required weeks of daily practice, each expansion of his limits paid for in pain and exhaustion. But he was learning. Not just about the ability itself, but about how to use it effectively within its constraints. 5 seconds didn't sound like much, but 5 seconds of frozen time was an eternity in combat. He could reposition, analyze the battlefield, identify threats and opportunities that would be invisible in the chaos of real-time conflict. He could study his opponent's stances and predict their movements. He could set up attacks that would seem to come from nowhere when time resumed. He practiced in secret, always in secret. The incident in Iruka's classroom had taught him a valuable lesson about the dangers of revealing what he could do. The villagers already feared and hated him for the demon they believed lived inside him. If they learned he could stop time itself, that fear would calcify into something far more dangerous. So he trained alone, in the early morning hours before the academy opened and the late evening hours after it closed. He found isolated training grounds at the edge of the village, clearings in the surrounding forest where no one would stumble upon him mid-practice. He developed exercises to push his limits, activating the ability repeatedly in quick succession to build tolerance, holding it as long as possible to stretch the duration, testing different applications to understand the mechanics. The physical component proved especially important. He'd discovered, through careful experimentation, that the weight of the frozen world, that strange resistance he felt when moving objects during stop time, was proportional to the object's mass but modified by how fast he tried to move it. Slow, deliberate movements encountered less resistance than quick, jerky ones. A gradual push was more effective than a sudden shove. This had implications for combat applications. If he tried to punch someone during frozen time, the resistance would slow his fist to the point of uselessness. The blow would land with all the force of a gentle tap, absorbed by whatever medium made movement in stillness so difficult. But if he positioned himself for a strike, drew back his arm, aimed carefully, loaded his muscles with tension, then released that strike the moment time resumed, the full force would connect before his opponent could react. It was like setting a spring trap. The preparation happened in stillness. The execution happened in motion. He practiced this endlessly, using training posts as targets. Activate the ability. Position himself behind the post. Draw back his fist. Let time resume. Strike immediately, before the three-dimensional awareness of his opponent could catch up to his two-dimensional displacement. The results were encouraging. His taijutsu grades, previously abysmal, since his form was sloppy and his speed unremarkable, began to improve. Not dramatically, but enough for Iruka to comment on it during one of their rare one-on-one sessions. "You're getting better," the Chunin observed, watching Naruto run through a basic kata. "Your positioning is improving. You're anticipating the next movement better than before." Naruto grinned, hiding the satisfaction that threatened to spread across his face like sunlight. "Just been training more, Iruka-sensei. Gotta get strong if I'm gonna be Hokage, right?" Iruka smiled, a genuine expression that Naruto had learned to treasure, since the teacher was one of the few villagers who offered it freely. "That's a good attitude. But remember, strength isn't just about physical ability. A true Hokage needs wisdom, compassion, and the trust of the people he protects." Yeah? Naruto waved off the advice with practiced dismissiveness, though he filed it away for later consideration. "So hey, Iruka-sensei, I wanted to ask you something. What is it? That thing that happened a few weeks ago. In class. When you know. He gestured vaguely, not wanting to be specific but needing to address the elephant that had been sitting in the room since December. Irika's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something that might have been concern or curiosity, or both. The teleporting incident? What about it? You didn't report it to anyone, did you? The question hung in the air between them. Naruto watched his teacher's face carefully, looking for any sign of deception. But Irika's expression was open, his posture relaxed, his voice calm when he replied. I submitted a standard incident report to the Hokage's office, he said. It's procedure for any unusual occurrence involving academy students. Why do you ask? Naruto's heart sank. He'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the incident had been overlooked. That Irika, in his genuine affection for his troublesome student, might have chosen to let it slide. But of course he hadn't. Irika was a professional, a loyal Konoha shinobi who followed protocols because he understood their importance. He wouldn't have covered up something like this, no matter how much he cared about the student involved. No reason, Naruto said, forcing lightness into his voice. Just wondering if I was gonna get in trouble or something. You're not in trouble, Naruto. Irika reached out and ruffled his hair, a gesture that always made Naruto feel simultaneously irritated and warm. Whatever happened that day, it wasn't malicious. Just try to be more careful in the future, okay? Some abilities are best developed privately, away from prying eyes. The advice was more pointed than Irika probably intended. Or perhaps it was exactly as pointed as he intended, a subtle acknowledgement that he understood more than he was letting on, combined with guidance that walked the line between professional duty and personal concern. Naruto nodded slowly. Yeah. I'll be careful. Good. Irika smiled again, and the moment passed. Now let's work on your shuriken accuracy. You're still throwing like a civilian with arm injury. Hey! My throws are awesome! Your throws consistently miss the target by a minimum of 10 centimeters. That's not awesome, Naruto. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Their banter continued as the training session resumed, but Naruto's mind was elsewhere. The Hokage knew. Maybe not the specifics, but he knew something unusual had happened. Which meant Anbu were probably watching more closely than before. Which meant he needed to be even more careful about when and where he practiced. The complications were multiplying. But so was his strength. 5 seconds, he reminded himself as he practiced his throws. 5 seconds and climbing. Whatever the Hokage knows, whatever the Anbu see, it won't matter if I can get strong enough. If I can prove myself. If I can become someone worthy of being Hokage. The dream felt less distant than it once had. Less laughable. Less impossible. For the first time in his life, Uzumaki Naruto was beginning to believe he might actually achieve something. Chapter 6, Spring Thaw. The seasons turned, and with them, Naruto's 8th birthday came and went, another October 10th spent huddled in his apartment, avoiding the memorial ceremonies and the heightened hostility they inspired. But this year, there was a difference. This year, he had a secret. A power. A source of hope that transformed the isolation from suffering into opportunity. He spent his birthday training. By the time winter began to loosen its grip on the land of fire, his duration had reached 7 seconds. The improvement was accelerating, not because the training was getting easier, but because his body was adapting more efficiently to the strain. The migraines, once incapacitating, had faded to a dull throb that barely registered against the background noise of his daily existence. His chakra reserves, never impressive to begin with, were expanding to accommodate the increased demands. And he was discovering new applications. The most significant breakthrough came in early March, during a solo training session in a clearing he'd found several kilometers outside the village walls. He'd been practicing his positioning exercises, activate, reposition, release, strike, when a thought occurred to him. What if he could use the frozen time for reconnaissance instead of combat? The idea seemed obvious in retrospect, but it had never occurred to him before. He'd been so focused on the martial applications of his ability that he'd overlooked its potential for information gathering. In 7 seconds of frozen time, he could examine a room, read documents, observe enemy positions, all without anyone ever knowing he'd been there. He tested this immediately. Returning to the village, he found a busy marketplace and positioned himself at the edge of the crowd. Then he activated. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto walked through the frozen tableau of merchants and customers, examining their faces, their goods, the contents of their baskets. He could read the labels on packages, count the coins in open purses, observe the subtle details that revealed so much about a person's circumstances and intentions. The pickpocket frozen mid-lift, his hand halfway into a distracted woman's bag. The merchant whose weights were clearly miscalibrated, cheating his customers out of a few grams with every transaction. The young couple holding hands beneath a flower stall, their frozen expressions radiating private joy. 7 seconds wasn't enough to see everything, but it was enough to see a lot. And in a battlefield situation, it would be enough to identify threats, locate allies, spot traps that would be invisible in the chaos of combat. The migraine that followed was moderate, a throbbing pressure behind his eyes that lasted most of the afternoon, but Naruto considered it a worthwhile investment. Reconnaissance, he thought as he lay on his apartment floor, waiting for the pain to subside. Information no one else can get, obtained in a way no one else can detect. The possibilities were beginning to seem endless. Spring brought other changes as well. The Academy's curriculum shifted from theoretical study to practical application, with more hours devoted to sparring and field exercises. Naruto's improved positioning, honed through months of training, began to show results in these sessions. He wasn't winning every fight, far from it, but he was losing less badly than before. His movements were becoming more efficient, his reactions more precise, his ability to read opponents more developed. The other students noticed. "Did you see that?" Kiba Inuzuka muttered to his seatmate after Naruto managed to land a clean hit on one of the higher-ranked students during a sparring match. "The dead last actually tagged Hibiki." "When did that happen?" "Fluke," his companion replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "Everyone gets lucky sometimes." But it wasn't a fluke, and they were beginning to suspect as much. Naruto's improvement was too consistent to be explained by chance. He was getting better in ways that defied his reputation as the eternal failure of the class. Naruto pretended not to notice the whispered speculation. It was better if they underestimated him, if they continued to see him as the talentless clown who would never amount to anything. The surprise was an advantage he wasn't willing to sacrifice for something as fleeting as recognition. But he couldn't help feeling a small, private satisfaction every time he exceeded their expectations. The Hokage's visit came in late April. Naruto had been expecting something like this ever since Irika mentioned the incident report, but the reality still caught him off guard. He was in the academy courtyard, practicing shuriken throws during a free period, when the familiar presence of Sarutobi Hiruzen materialized behind him. "Your form is improving." Naruto spun, heart hammering, and found the third Hokage watching him with an expression of gentle amusement. The old man was wearing his casual robes rather than his formal regalia, an attempt, perhaps, to make the encounter seem less official than it was. "Old man Hokage." Naruto forced brightness into his voice, playing his role. "What are you doing here? Don't you have, important Hokage stuff to do? Even Hokages need breaks from paperwork." Hiruzen replied, his eyes crinkling with what might have been genuine warmth. "I thought I'd visit the academy, see how the next generation is developing. Mind if I watch you practice?" It wasn't really a question. Naruto recognized the subtle authority beneath the casual phrasing and knew that refusal wasn't an option. "Sure, I guess." He turned back to the targets and launched another shuriken, deliberately letting his aim slip a few centimeters off-center. Hitting perfectly while the Hokage was watching would draw exactly the kind of attention he was trying to avoid. Hiruzen observed in silence as Naruto worked through his remaining shuriken, his aged eyes tracking each throw with the analytical precision of a master shinobi. When the last projectile had thunked into its target, slightly off-center, consistent with his documented accuracy, the old man nodded thoughtfully. "You've made progress since last year. Your teachers speak well of your dedication, even if your grades don't always reflect it." "Yeah, well," Naruto shrugged with practiced nonchalance. "Book stuff is boring. I'd rather be out here, actually doing ninja things." A common sentiment among academy students. Hiruzen moved to stand beside him, his gaze fixed on the targets rather than Naruto's face, a deliberate choice, the boy realized, designed to make the conversation feel less like an interrogation. "Tell me, Naruto. Have you experienced anything unusual lately? Anything that surprised you or that you didn't understand?" The question was carefully phrased, open-ended enough to invite confession without demanding it. Naruto felt the familiar prickle of paranoia across his shoulders, the same sensation he'd experienced countless times when villagers stared too long, when whispered conversations fell silent as he approached. "Unusual?" He injected confusion into his voice. "Like what?" "Anything at all. Strange dreams. Unexpected abilities. Moments where the world seemed different than it should be." Naruto's heart was pounding, but he kept his expression innocent, his body language relaxed. Years of being the village pariah had taught him how to present a facade, how to hide his true thoughts behind a mask of oblivious cheerfulness. "Nope," he said, popping the P for emphasis. "Nothing unusual here. Just regular old Naruto, future Hokage, pranking master, and all-around awesome ninja." Hiruzen turned to look at him directly, and for a moment, Naruto felt the weight of decades of experience pressing against his thin facade. The third Hokage had survived 2 world wars. He had faced the Kyuubi no Kitsune and lived to tell about it. He had navigated the labyrinthine politics of hidden villages for longer than most shinobi lived. If anyone could see through Naruto's deception, it was this man. But whatever the old man saw in Naruto's eyes, he chose not to pursue it. "I'm glad to hear it," Hiruzen said, his tone light. "But if anything unusual does happen, anything at all, I want you to come to me directly. Not Iruka, not the Anbu, me. Can you promise me that, Naruto?" The request was unexpected, carrying an undertone of something that might have been concern. Naruto studied the Hokage's face, searching for the trap, but found only the same grandfatherly warmth that Hiruzen had always shown him, one of the few adults in the village who treated him with anything approaching kindness. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, I can promise that." "Good." Hiruzen smiled and reached out to ruffle Naruto's hair, the same gesture Iruka often used, though somehow more weighted coming from the leader of the entire village. "Keep training hard. The will of fire burns brightly in you, whether you realize it or not." Then he was gone, walking back toward the academy building with the unhurried pace of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. Naruto watched him go, his mind churning with questions and concerns. The Hokage knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. The questions about unusual abilities, the direct request to report any anomalies, these weren't the idle inquiries of a casual visitor. "He's watching me," Naruto realized. "Has probably been watching me all along. And now he's watching more closely because of what happened in Iruka's classroom." The thought should have been frightening. It was, in a way. But there was also something almost reassuring about it. The third Hokage, whatever his reasons, had taken a personal interest in Naruto's development. Had reached out directly rather than relying on reports from subordinates. Had made himself available as a resource if Naruto ever needed help. It was more than any other adult in the village had ever offered. If things get bad, Naruto thought as he gathered his shuriken for another round of practice, really bad, maybe I could tell him. Maybe he'd understand. Maybe he'd help instead of. He didn't finish the thought. The alternative, what might happen if the Hokage didn't understand, if the village's fear of the Kyuubi extended to any unusual abilities Naruto might manifest, was too terrible to contemplate. For now, he would keep training. Keep improving. Keep his secret close until he was strong enough that no one could take it away from him. The spring sun was warm on his skin as he launched another shuriken, and despite everything, Naruto smiled. Chapter 7. The gradual accumulation of power. The years that followed were defined by a single, relentless purpose: growth. Naruto threw himself into training with an intensity that surprised even himself. The academy became merely a backdrop to his real education, the private sessions in hidden clearings, the early morning exercises, the late-night experiments that pushed his ability to its limits, and beyond. He learned to hide his progress, to perform exactly as expected in front of others while saving his true capabilities for solitary practice. By his 9th birthday, he had reached 12 seconds. By his 10th, 18. The migraines had faded to a mild discomfort that he barely noticed anymore, the price of adaptation, of a body that had slowly reconfigured itself to handle the strain of temporal manipulation. His chakra reserves had expanded dramatically, though not to the point where he could consistently perform the basic clone technique that the academy required. There was something wrong with his chakra control, some fundamental imbalance that made the delicate manipulation required for standard jutsu almost impossibly difficult. But his time-stopping ability didn't require delicate manipulation. It required only the reaching, the grasping, the contact with that deeper layer of his chakra network that responded to desperate need. And in that arena, Naruto excelled. He developed a training regimen that would have impressed even a jounin. Physical conditioning occupied the early morning hours, running, stretching, strength exercises designed to build the explosive power needed for his spring trap combat style. He couldn't move quickly during frozen time, but he could position himself perfectly and release devastating strikes the moment time resumed. Tactical exercises filled his afternoons, whenever academy duties permitted. He would find crowded locations, marketplaces, festival grounds, the civilian districts where no one expected a ninja to be training, and practice his reconnaissance applications. Activate, observe, analyze, release. The more information he could gather in his frozen seconds, the better prepared he would be for any situation. And in the evenings, he pushed his limits. This was the most demanding part of his training, the deliberate attempt to extend his duration through repeated use and calculated recovery. He had discovered that his ability functioned much like a muscle, straining it to its limits, then allowing it to recover, resulted in gradual improvement. The key was finding the right balance between exertion and rest, pushing hard enough to stimulate growth without pushing so hard that he injured himself. The injuries, when they came, were unique to his situation. He learned to recognize the warning signs, a particular quality to the headache, a visual distortion at the edges of his frozen perception, a sensation of his consciousness beginning to fray at the edges. These were indicators that he had pushed too far, that he needed to release the ability immediately and rest before attempting anything else. Ignoring these warnings, he discovered on one memorable occasion, resulted in a 3-day migraine that left him bedridden and hallucinating. He learned his lessons and incorporated them into his training. Push to the limit, but not beyond. Expand the envelope gradually rather than trying to burst through it all at once. Respect the ability's constraints even as he worked to transcend them. The progress, slow but undeniable, became its own source of motivation. The academy years passed in a blur of classroom lessons and private training, of maintaining his facade of mediocrity while secretly developing capabilities that no one could have imagined. Naruto became adept at the double life, presenting one face to the world while cultivating another in the shadows. His public persona remained unchanged, the loud, obnoxious deadlast who couldn't perform a basic clone technique to save his life. His teachers despaired of him. His classmates dismissed him. The villagers continued their whispered contempt, their pointed avoidance, their casual cruelty. But beneath that surface, something extraordinary was taking shape. By the time he reached his 11th year, Naruto could freeze time for 25 seconds. 25 seconds of absolute stillness in which to observe, analyze, reposition, prepare. 25 seconds that, in combat, would feel like an eternity to anyone facing him. He had also developed a vocabulary for his ability, private terminology that helped him understand and discuss, with himself, at least, the mechanics of what he could do. The activation was the reach, that internal grasping toward the deeper layer of chakra that triggered the effect. The frozen state was the stillness, the absolute silence and immobility that characterized the stopped world. The resistance he encountered when moving objects was the weight, the strange pressure that made physical interaction during the stillness so difficult. The release was the crack, named for the sound that accompanied the resumption of normal time, audible only to him as if reality itself was snapping back into alignment. The headaches, the primary cost of using the ability, he called the toll. These terms gave him a framework for thinking about his power, for analyzing its strengths and limitations, for developing strategies that maximized its utility while minimizing its costs. And he was beginning to understand just how powerful it could be. Chapter 8: The Final Year. Naruto's 12th birthday arrived with the familiar rituals of October, memorial lanterns, somber ceremonies, and heightened hostility from villagers who had never learned to separate the demon from its container. But this year carried an additional weight. This was his final year at the academy. This was the year that would determine whether he became a genin, a true Konoha shinobi, or remained the village's eternal failure. The graduation exam loomed. 3 components: written test, weapons proficiency, and ninjutsu demonstration. Naruto was confident about the second, passably prepared for the first, and utterly doomed on the third. The clone technique remained his nemesis. No matter how hard he practiced, no matter how many hours he devoted to the standard training methods, he simply could not produce a functional clone. His chakra was too wild, too uncontrolled, too fundamentally incompatible with the delicate manipulation the technique required. Every attempt produced either nothing at all or a pathetic, discolored facsimile that wouldn't fool a blindfolded civilian. It was frustrating beyond measure. Here he was, capable of stopping time itself, an ability that no one else in the village, possibly no one else in the entire world, possessed, and he couldn't perform a basic jutsu that academy students half his age could manage. The irony was bitter, and he swallowed it down with practiced ease. You need to find a different approach, he told himself one evening, sitting alone in his apartment and staring at the wall. The standard methods aren't working. They're never going to work. If you want to pass, you need something else. But what else was there? The graduation exam was specific about its requirements. Clone technique or failure. Those were the only options. Unless. A thought began to form in his mind, dangerous and tempting and absolutely forbidden. The Scroll of Seals. He'd heard about it from Mizuki-sensei, one of the academy instructors who occasionally showed him more kindness than the others, or what passed for kindness, at least. The scroll contained forbidden techniques, Mizuki had mentioned, techniques deemed too dangerous for regular shinobi but preserved for emergencies. And among those techniques, supposedly, were alternative versions of standard jutsu. Alternative versions that might work with his uncontrollable chakra. The plan crystallized with frightening clarity. Steal the scroll. Find an alternative clone technique. Learn it before anyone could stop him. Present it at the graduation exam as if it were the standard version. It was risky. Insanely risky. Stealing from the Hokage's vault was a crime punishable by imprisonment, or worse. If he was caught. But if he wasn't caught, if he succeeded, he would finally achieve the recognition he'd been chasing his entire life. He would become a genin. He would take the first real step toward his dream. Naruto began to plan. The night of the theft was cold and clear, the autumn moon casting silver light across Konoha's rooftops. Naruto had prepared carefully, scouting the route to the Hokage's residence over the previous week, timing the Anbu patrols, identifying the moments of vulnerability in the security. His temporal ability was central to the plan. 30 seconds. That was his current limit, 30 seconds of frozen time in which to cover the critical portions of the route, to bypass guards who couldn't see him moving, to enter and exit the vault without triggering any alarms. It wasn't much margin for error, but it was enough. It had to be enough. He began the approach at midnight dressed in dark clothing that he'd purchased from a second-hand shop in the civilian district. His heart was pounding as he slipped through the shadows, every sense alert for signs of detection. The first Anbu patrol passed within arm's length of his hiding spot. Naruto held his breath, counting the seconds until they moved on, then resumed his advance. The Hokage's residence loomed ahead, a traditional building of wood and tile that belied its significance as the administrative heart of the village. The security here would be tightest, multiple guards, surveillance seals, probably traps that he couldn't even detect. Time to use his advantage. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto moved quickly but deliberately, mindful of the weight that would slow him if he tried to rush. He crossed the open ground in front of the residence, skirting the frozen forms of two guards who stood like statues on either side of the main entrance. The door was closed but unlocked, a detail he'd counted on, since the guards were supposed to be the primary deterrent against intruders. He pushed the door open, noting how it moved through the frozen air like an object submerged in honey, and slipped inside. 15 seconds left. The interior was familiar from his occasional visits to the Hokage's office, though this was a different part of the building, the residential section where the vault was supposed to be located. He moved through the hallway, checking doors, searching for the one that would lead him to his target. 10 seconds. There. A door at the end of the hallway, marked with seals that he couldn't read but that radiated the unmistakable aura of high-level security. This had to be the vault. 5 seconds. He reached for the door handle. Crack. Time resumed. The door opened. Naruto found himself face to face with the third Hokage. For a moment, neither of them moved. Hiruzen was dressed in a sleeping robe, his pipe held loosely in one hand, his expression one of mild surprise rather than alarm. Behind him, in the room that should have been a vault, Naruto could see a simple bedroom, a futon, a low table, a few personal effects arranged with the sparse precision of a lifelong soldier. Naruto, the old man said, and there was something almost amused in his voice. I was wondering when you would try something like this. Naruto's mind raced. He'd been caught. He was standing in the Hokage's private residence in the middle of the night, clearly engaged in something unauthorized. The excuses he'd prepared seemed hopelessly inadequate against the reality of Hiruzen's knowing gaze. Old man Hokage. He managed. I was just, looking for the bathroom. Hiruzen sighed, a deep, weary exhalation that carried the weight of decades. Come inside, Naruto. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. Chapter 9. Truth Beneath the Surface. The Hokage's private study was smaller than his official office but more comfortably furnished, with cushions for sitting and a low table that held a tea set of obvious age and quality. Hiruzen gestured for Naruto to sit, then busied himself with preparing tea while the boy watched in nervous silence. You were attempting to steal the scroll of seals, Hiruzen said without preamble, his back turned as he heated water over a small brazier. No doubt because you've heard it contains alternative versions of standard jutsu, techniques that might work where the basic academy curriculum has failed you. Naruto's stomach dropped. The old man knew everything. Of course he did. He was the Hokage. How did you know? That you were coming? Or that you would eventually try something like this? Hiruzen turned, carrying 2 cups of steaming tea, and settled across from Naruto with the ease of someone for whom conversations like this were routine. The answer to both is simple observation. You've been struggling with the clone technique for years, and your desperation to pass the graduation exam is hardly subtle. When Mizuki mentioned the scroll in your hearing, yes, I know about that too, I suspected it would only be a matter of time before you acted. Wait. Naruto's mind caught on a detail that didn't make sense. You knew Mizuki-sensei told me about the scroll? Mizuki has been under suspicion for some time. His interaction with you was being monitored. Something cold settled in Naruto's chest. He wanted me to steal it. Most likely, yes. To create an incident that would either result in your death or imprisonment, depending on how the situation developed. Hiruzen's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. I'm sorry, Naruto. I should have intervened sooner, but I was hoping to gather more evidence against him before acting. The revelation should have been shocking, but somehow it wasn't. Mizuki had always been a little too friendly, a little too helpful, his kindness carrying an edge that Naruto had noticed but chosen to ignore because any kindness was better than none. "So what happens now?" Naruto asked, his voice smaller than he intended. "Am I going to jail? For attempting to steal a scroll you never actually touched?" Hiruzen smiled slightly. "I think we can overlook this particular incident. Consider it a valuable lesson about trust and manipulation." Relief flooded through Naruto, but it was tempered by confusion. "But I broke into your house. I was going to commit a crime. Why aren't you?" "Because I understand desperation, Naruto. Because I know what it means to want something so badly that you're willing to risk everything to achieve it." The old man's eyes were distant, seeing something beyond the walls of this small room. "And because I believe you deserve a chance to become the shinobi I know you can be." He reached into his robe and produced a scroll, not the massive scroll of seals that Naruto had been seeking, but a smaller, simpler container marked with a single character. "This is a specialized training scroll containing the shadow clone technique," Hiruzen said, placing it on the table between them. "It's a forbidden jutsu, B-rank classified, but it may be more suited to your particular circumstances." "My circumstances?" "Your chakra reserves are unusually large, Naruto. The standard clone technique fails for you because it requires precise control over a small amount of chakra, and you have neither the control nor the small amount. The shadow clone technique is the opposite. It requires large reserves and divides them equally among your clones. It's difficult for most shinobi because they lack the chakra capacity. For you, it should be manageable." Naruto stared at the scroll as if it might bite him. "You're giving me a forbidden technique?" "I'm giving you an opportunity." Hiruzen's voice hardened slightly, taking on the authority of the Hokage rather than the grandfatherly concern he usually showed. "The graduation exam is in 1 week. Learn this technique well enough to demonstrate it, and I will personally authorize its use as a substitute for the standard clone requirement. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." The words came automatically, driven by the weight of the moment. Then, more hesitantly, "But why? Why help me like this? Everyone else in the village sees only what they want to see." Hiruzen cut him off with uncharacteristic sharpness. "They see the date of your birth and the circumstances of your infancy, and choose to believe that these things define you. I see a boy who has been training in secret for years, developing abilities that no one else knows about, pushing himself to grow stronger despite every obstacle the world has placed in his path." Naruto's blood ran cold. You know? Did you think your improvements would go unnoticed? Your positioning in sparring matches, your sudden ability to read opponents, the occasional displacements that have occurred when you forget to be careful? The old man's smile was gentle but knowing. "I don't know what exactly you can do, Naruto. You've been remarkably skilled at hiding the details. But I know it's something significant and unprecedented." The secret he'd guarded so carefully for 5 years was suddenly exposed, laid bare before the most powerful shinobi in the village. Naruto felt panic rising in his chest, the familiar fear of discovery, of what the villagers would do if they learned he possessed abilities beyond their understanding. But Hiruzen wasn't a villager. Hiruzen was the Hokage. And his expression held no fear, no suspicion, only a deep and patient curiosity. "You don't have to tell me what it is," the old man said, reading Naruto's fear with unsettling accuracy. "Not yet, not until you're ready. But I want you to know that whatever power you've developed, I don't see it as a threat. I see it as potential. The potential to become something remarkable." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Naruto found himself blinking back tears, an embarrassing reaction that he tried to hide by grabbing the teacup and taking a long drink. "Thank you," he managed when he'd composed himself. "For this. For everything. Don't thank me yet." Hiruzen's tone returned to its usual warmth, touched with a hint of wry humor. "The shadow clone technique is extremely difficult, and you have only a week to learn it. I suggest you begin immediately." Naruto grabbed the scroll, his determination rekindling with ferocious intensity. He had a technique to learn, an exam to pass, a dream to pursue. And now, for the first time, he had an ally who truly understood. Chapter 10, 1 week. The shadow clone technique was nothing like the standard clone. Where the basic academy jutsu created insubstantial illusions, images without substance, the shadow clone produced actual, physical duplicates of the user. These clones could move independently, interact with the environment, even use chakra techniques of their own. They were, in effect, temporary copies of the original, complete with memories and personalities. The cost was proportional. Creating a shadow clone divided the user's chakra equally between themselves and the clone. 2 clones meant each entity had 1/3 of the original chakra. 3 clones meant 1/4. And so on, the fractions growing ever smaller as the number of duplicates increased. For most shinobi, this was a severe limitation. Creating even a handful of clones could leave them dangerously depleted, vulnerable in combat, or unable to perform other techniques. The jutsu was classified as forbidden not because of any inherent danger, but because using it carelessly could lead to chakra exhaustion and death. For Naruto, whose reserves were abnormally large, the calculus was different. He discovered this on the first night of training, when he attempted to create a single clone and instead produced 23. What the? 23 identical copies of himself stared back at him, their expressions ranging from confusion to delight. The clearing he'd chosen for practice was suddenly overcrowded, a sea of orange jackets and blonde hair that stretched into the moonlit shadows. That's a lot, one of the clones observed. We made a lot of us. Obviously we made a lot of us, idiot. We're standing right here. Who are you calling an idiot? We're the same person. The argument devolved rapidly into chaos, clones shouting at each other while Naruto, the original, stood frozen in shock. He hadn't meant to create this many. He'd been trying for one, just one, following the instructions in the scroll with careful precision. But the chakra had been there, vast and eager, and the technique had responded by producing as many duplicates as his reserves could support. 23 clones. And he barely felt tired. The implications were staggering. He spent the week exploring those implications, training himself to control the technique, while simultaneously discovering its benefits. The most significant discovery came on the second night: memory transfer. When a shadow clone dispersed, either voluntarily or through damage, its memories returned to the original. Everything the clone had seen, heard, learned, experienced became part of Naruto's own memories, as if he had lived through those moments himself. This meant that training multiplied. If he created 20 clones and had each one practice a different exercise for an hour, he gained 20 hours of practice from 1 hour of real time. The potential for accelerated learning was immense, limited only by his ability to process the incoming memories without becoming overwhelmed. He tested the limits carefully. 10 clones dispersing simultaneously was manageable, a brief disorientation, a flood of experiences that took a few moments to integrate, but nothing worse than a mild headache. 20 was more difficult. The memories came in a torrent, blurring together at the edges, requiring several minutes of quiet concentration to sort out. 30 was problematic. The influx of information triggered something disturbingly similar to his old temporal migraines, a splitting pain behind his eyes that persisted for hours. He learned to stagger the dispersals, having clones dismiss themselves in small groups rather than all at once. This spread the memory integration over time, reducing the strain on his mind. And he learned to use the technique in conjunction with his temporal ability. This combination proved devastating. In frozen time, his clones remained motionless like everything else. They were, after all, physical beings subject to the same laws that govern the stopped world. But if he created clones before activating the stillness, they could provide information after he released it. Position clones in strategic locations. Freeze time. Observe the battlefield. Release time. Have clones disperse. Receive their memories. Process the combined information from multiple perspectives. It was reconnaissance multiplied, observation from every angle, an intelligence-gathering network compressed into seconds. The tactical applications were nearly limitless. By the end of the week, Naruto had transformed. His control over the shadow clone technique was far from perfect. He still tended to create more clones than intended, still struggled with fine adjustments to the chakra distribution, but he could reliably produce functional duplicates on demand. The technique had become another tool in his arsenal, complementing his temporal ability in ways that neither could achieve alone. The graduation exam arrived on a crisp autumn morning, the academy courtyard filled with anxious students and watchful instructors. Naruto took his place among the others, his expression carefully calibrated to show the appropriate level of nervousness. Inside, he was calm. He was ready. The written test came first, a slog through questions about history, tactics, and chakra theory that Naruto survived through sheer stubbornness. His clone-enhanced studying had helped, but he still lacked the academic foundation that other students possessed. He passed, barely, and that was enough. The weapon's proficiency was easier. His years of positioning practice had honed his accuracy far beyond his documented skill level, and he allowed just enough of that ability to show to pass the examination without raising suspicions. Then came the ninjutsu demonstration. Uzumaki Naruto, Iruka called, consulting his clipboard. Please demonstrate the clone technique. Naruto stepped forward, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. Iruka's expression was neutral but tinged with worry. The teacher had seen too many of Naruto's failed attempts to expect success now. Beside him, Mizuki sat with barely concealed anticipation, no doubt hoping for the failure that would make Naruto vulnerable to further manipulation. The Hokage had dealt with Mizuki days ago, Naruto knew. The traitor was being watched, his contacts monitored, his schemes documented for future prosecution. But he'd been left in place to avoid alerting any co-conspirators, and so he sat there now, expecting to witness his plan's fruition. Naruto smiled. "I'd like to demonstrate an alternative clone technique," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "The Shadow Clone Jutsu. I have the Hokage's authorization." Murmurs rippled through the assembled students and instructors. Iruka's eyes widened, Mizuki's expression shifted to confusion, then dawning alarm. That's a forbidden technique," one of the other instructors protested. "An academy student can't." "Check with the Hokage's office if you doubt it," Naruto cut in. "I'll wait." A runner was dispatched. The courtyard hummed with speculation. Naruto stood calmly, hands at his sides, watching Mizuki's increasingly agitated expression with private satisfaction. The runner returned within minutes, breathless but bearing the Hokage's seal of approval. The authorization was genuine. The demonstration could proceed. Naruto formed the cross-shaped hand seal. "Shadow Clone Jutsu!" The chakra surged, dividing and multiplying, and the courtyard suddenly contained not one Naruto but 50, a crowd of orange-clad duplicates that filled the available space and spilled out into the surrounding area. Silence. Absolute, thunderstruck silence. Then Iruka began to laugh, a sound of pure, disbelieving joy that broke the tension and transformed the moment into something approaching celebration. "You pass," the teacher said, still laughing. "Dear gods, Naruto, you pass." Chapter 11 Headband. The Konoha forehead protector felt strange against his skin, cool metal and worn fabric, lighter than he'd expected given the weight of everything it represented. Naruto adjusted it for the dozenth time as he walked home through the village's twilight streets, unable to keep from running his fingers across the etched spiral that marked him as a true shinobi. He was a genin now. After years of failure, years of mockery, years of being told he would never amount to anything, he had finally taken the first real step toward his dream. The headband was proof. The headband was promise. The headband was the beginning of everything he had been working toward. "Nice headband, demon." The words came from a side alley, accompanied by the creak of bodies rising from concealment. Naruto stopped walking, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon pouch before he registered that the voices belonged to teenagers, academy washouts, from the look of them. Civilians who had failed the genin exam and never recovered from the blow to their pride. 3 of them emerged from the shadows, their expressions ugly with the particular malice of the young and disappointed. "Heard you finally passed," the leader said, a heavy-set youth with a scar on his chin that spoke of a training accident. "Must have cheated somehow." "No way the demon actually learned anything." "I didn't cheat," Naruto said evenly. "I demonstrated an authorized technique in front of the entire examination board. If you think there was something improper about it, take it up with the Hokage." "Oh, listen to him. Acting all high and mighty now that he's got a little metal badge." The leader stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You forget who you are, demon? You forget what you did." The familiar accusation washed over Naruto without impact. He'd heard it too many times to feel anything but a dull weariness when it was directed at him. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I was a baby when the Kyuubi attacked. But you know what? I'm done explaining that to people who don't want to listen." He turned to walk away. A hand grabbed his shoulder. The reaction was instinctive, crack. The world stopped. The 3 teenagers were frozen mid-motion, their expressions locked in states of aggression and surprise. The leader's hand was rigid on Naruto's shoulder, his grip no longer pressing flesh but transformed into an unmoving contact that Naruto could easily slip away from. He had 30 seconds. In the stillness, Naruto studied the situation with the analytical eye that years of training had developed. 3 opponents, no weapons visible, no chakra signatures that suggested ninja training. Civilian threats, uncoordinated and predictable. He could walk away. Simply step out of the leader's frozen grip and continue on his way. By the time the world resumed, he would be around the corner, and out of sight. But something stopped him. These people had attacked him, not the first to do so, certainly not the last. If he simply fled, they would try again. They would find him in other alleys, on other evenings, their hatred undiminished by his absence. The cycle would continue endlessly, a pattern of harassment that had defined his entire childhood. Maybe it was time to change the pattern. Naruto moved carefully, positioning himself behind the 3 teenagers. He drew 3 kunai from his weapon pouch, real weapons now, not the training dulls the academy had provided, and placed them at strategic points. One pressed against the leader's lower back, angled to suggest a kidney strike. Another at the second teenager's throat, just touching the skin. The third hovering near the groin of the last attacker. Then he released the stillness. Crack. The 3 teenagers felt the cold metal against their bodies simultaneously. Their expressions shifted from aggression to terror in the span of a heartbeat, their minds struggling to process how the boy they'd been threatening had suddenly materialized behind them with weapons at their most vulnerable points. "Listen carefully," Naruto said, his voice calm and quiet. I'm going to say this once. The leader whimpered. Naruto could feel the man trembling against the kunai's edge. I'm a shinobi now. A real one, with a headband and a team and a license to kill in defense of Konoha and myself. If you attack me again, any of you, ever, I won't hold back. I won't run. I'll treat you as hostile enemies and respond accordingly. He let the words sink in, feeling the shift in the air as terror gave way to understanding. Now go home. Tell your friends. Tell everyone who thinks the demon is an easy target. The next person who comes at me in an alley is going to learn a very painful lesson about the consequences of their choices. He withdrew the kunai in a single smooth motion, stepped back, and waited. The three teenagers ran. Naruto watched them go, their panicked footsteps fading into the evening shadows. He felt no satisfaction in what he'd done, only a tired acceptance that this was how the world worked. Strength demanded respect. Weakness invited exploitation. He had been weak for too long, now he was beginning to become strong. The headband gleamed on his forehead as he resumed his walk home, and for the first time, it felt like it truly belonged there. Chapter 12, Team 7. The team assignments came 3 days later. Naruto sat in the academy classroom, his last time in this room as a student, and listened as Iruka read the names that would define his immediate future. The genin around him buzzed with nervous energy, whispering predictions and hopes, forming alliances and rivalries that would persist for years to come. Team 7. Iruka announced. Uzumaki Naruto. Haruno Sakura. Uchiha Sasuke. Your jounin instructor is Hatake Kakashi. The reaction was immediate and divided. Sakura, the pink-haired girl who sat near the front, let out a shriek of joy at being placed with her crush, the brooding Uchiha heir. Naruto felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sakura was his own crush, had been since their early academy days, but he'd long ago accepted that his feelings were unrequited. Being on her team would be complicated. And then there was Sasuke. The dark-haired boy sat in his usual spot by the window, his expression betraying nothing. He was the class's top student, skilled, intelligent, driven by a mysterious tragedy that he never discussed but that everyone knew about. The Uchiha massacre was legendary, whispered about in the sort of hushed tones usually reserved for ghost stories. Sasuke was also, by all accounts, a miserable human being to spend time with. This should be interesting. Naruto muttered to himself, ignoring Sakura's animated chatter about how wonderful it would be to train alongside Sasuke. The team assignments continued, other trios forming and departing with their instructors, until only Team 7 remained in the emptying classroom. They waited. And waited. Hours passed. The other team's instructors had all arrived promptly. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. Where the hell is he? Naruto finally demanded, breaking the awkward silence that had settled over the three genin. It's been like 4 hours. Kakashi-sensei is known for being late. Sakura offered, though her tone suggested she was reaching the limits of her patience as well. It's supposedly part of his personality. His personality is annoying, Naruto said flatly. What kind of sensei leaves his new team sitting in an empty classroom for half the day? The kind who's testing you, a voice said from the doorway. The three genin turned to find a silver-haired man leaning against the doorframe, his face obscured by a mask that revealed only one eye, and that eye was fixed on Naruto with an intensity that suggested careful evaluation. You're the ones who complained the least, Kakashi continued, entering the room with a lazy stride that belied the obvious power in his movements. Some teams start arguments within the first hour. Others give up and leave. You three waited. With respect, sensei, Sasuke said, his voice cold. Testing patience isn't the same as teaching ninja skills. Isn't it? Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in what might have been amusement. Patience is one of the most valuable skills a ninja can possess. The ability to wait, to observe, to strike only when the moment is right. These are the foundations of successful missions. He paused, studying each of them in turn. Sakura with her obvious infatuation, Sasuke with his barely contained frustration, Naruto with his deliberately neutral expression. Meet me on Training Ground 3 tomorrow morning at sunrise, Kakashi said. We'll do proper introductions then, followed by a test that will determine whether you actually become my students or get sent back to the academy. Wait, what? Sakura's voice rose in alarm. We already passed the graduation exam. The graduation exam tests individual skills. My test evaluates team potential. Kakashi's tone was light, almost bored. Fail it, and you'll find that the headbands you're so proud of don't mean very much. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and don't eat breakfast tomorrow. You'll probably throw up if you do. Then he was gone, leaving three very confused genin staring at the empty doorway. Chapter 13, Bells and Shadows. Training Ground 3 was a clearing in the forest east of the village. bordered by a shallow stream and dominated by 3 wooden posts that had clearly seen years of use. Naruto arrived at dawn, having ignored Kakashi's advice about breakfast. If there was going to be some kind of test, he wanted to be at full strength for it. Sakura and Sasuke were already there, the former yawning and the latter standing with arms crossed, his expression suggesting he considered this entire process beneath him. Naruto took a position equidistant from both, completing the triangle that defined their nascent team. They waited. And waited. 3 hours later, Kakashi appeared, strolling into the clearing with no apparent awareness that he was dramatically late. "Yo! You're late!" Sakura shouted, her patience finally cracking. "You told us to be here at sunrise." "Ah, yes. I got lost on the road of life." The excuse was so absurd that even Sasuke looked momentarily taken aback. Naruto simply stared, trying to determine whether their sensei was serious or performing some kind of test of their reactions. "Anyway," Kakashi continued, producing 2 small bells from his pouch. "Here's the test. I have 2 bells. Your job is to take them from me before noon. Anyone who fails to get a bell goes without lunch and gets tied to one of those posts while I eat in front of them. But there are only 2 bells," Sakura pointed out. "And 3 of us." "Correct. Which means at least one of you will definitely fail and go hungry." Kakashi's eye crinkled again. "The timer starts, now." He attached the bells to his belt and settled into a relaxed stance, clearly waiting for them to make the first move. Naruto assessed the situation rapidly. 2 bells, 3 genin. The obvious conclusion was that they were being pitted against each other, forced to compete for limited resources. But something about that logic felt wrong. Kakashi had mentioned testing their team potential. And a competition wouldn't test teamwork, it would test individual skill. So either Kakashi was lying about his purpose, or there was a deeper layer to this test that they were supposed to figure out. Before Naruto could voice any of this, Sasuke moved. The Uchiha launched a flurry of shuriken toward Kakashi, using the attack as cover for a rapid approach. The Jounin deflected the projectiles with casual ease and met Sasuke's taijutsu with apparent boredom, deflecting and redirecting without ever seeming to take the battle seriously. Sakura remained frozen, clearly uncertain of what to do. Her crush was fighting, but she wasn't skilled enough to contribute meaningfully, and her analytical mind was probably working through the same paradox Naruto had identified. Time for an experiment. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto moved immediately, circling to observe the frozen battle from multiple angles. Kakashi's stance was deceptively relaxed, but in the stillness, Naruto could see the subtle tensions that indicated where his weight was positioned, where his balance could be disrupted, where openings existed that would be invisible in the chaos of normal combat. More importantly, he could see the bells. They hung from Kakashi's belt, completely undefended during this moment between moments. He could reach out and take them right now, simply pluck them from the Jounin's frozen body and end the test before it truly began. But something stopped him. The weight. When he tested his ability on that bird years ago, touching a living creature had broken the stillness prematurely. Would the same happen if he tried to take the bells directly from Kakashi's body? And even if he succeeded, would it really prove anything? The test was supposed to evaluate team potential. A solo victory achieved through abilities no one else possessed wouldn't demonstrate teamwork. It would just demonstrate that Naruto could cheat. He filed the thought away for later consideration and focused on gathering information instead. Kakashi's visible eye was fixed on Sasuke, tracking the boy's movement with the precision of an experienced combatant. But there was something strange about his posture, a slight orientation of his body that didn't match the apparent focus of his attention. He was watching Sakura and Naruto too, even while engaging Sasuke, keeping track of all 3 genin simultaneously. "One-eyed wolf," Naruto murmured to himself, using the civilian nickname he'd heard in the village. "They say he has the Sharingan in his other eye. The copy ninja." If that was true, if Kakashi possessed one of the legendary Dijutsu of the Uchiha clan, then his apparent relaxation was even more of a facade than it seemed. He was probably analyzing every movement, predicting every attack, planning several moves ahead while seeming to barely try. 30 seconds. Time was running out. Naruto repositioned himself behind Sakura, close enough to speak but not close enough to be immediately obvious when time resumed. Then he released the stillness. Crack. "Can't touch him!" Sasuke was shouting, having been thrown back by a technique that had moved too fast to see. "Sakura," Naruto said quietly. "The test isn't about getting the bells." The pink-haired girl jumped, startled by his sudden proximity. "What? How did you? Never mind. What do you mean? Think about it. 2 bells, 3 people. If this was really about competition, he'd have told us beforehand. But he didn't. He sprung it on us at the last second, right after talking about team potential. It's a trap. He wants us to turn on each other, and whoever figures out that's the wrong choice. Understanding dawned in Sakura's eyes. They pass. Probably. Or at least they get closer to passing. Naruto kept his voice low, watching Kakashi toy with Sasuke in the distance. We need to work together. All three of us coordinated. That's what he's actually testing. But Sasuke. I'll get Sasuke. You think of a plan. He started to move, then paused. You're supposed to be the smart one, right? The best grades in kunoichi classes? Sakura nodded, surprised by the acknowledgement. Then be smart. Figure out how 3 genin who've never worked together can take on a jounin. I'll handle the rest. He was gone before she could respond, moving to intercept the ongoing battle between Sasuke and Kakashi. Convincing Sasuke to cooperate was harder than convincing Sakura. The Uchiha heir was proud, arrogant, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. The suggestion that he needed help, that victory required teamwork rather than individual excellence, grated against everything his trauma had taught him to believe. I don't need you. He snarled when Naruto intercepted him between exchanges with Kakashi. I can take the bells myself. No, you can't. Naruto's voice was flat, carrying the conviction of someone who had analyzed the situation thoroughly. He's playing with you. Every attack you've made, he's deflected without trying. Every technique you've attempted, he's countered before you completed it. You're skilled, Sasuke, maybe the most skilled genin in our year, but you're not jounin level. None of us are. So what's your plan, dead last? The nickname carried the same contempt it always had, the same dismissal that Naruto had endured for years. Fight together. Cover each other's weaknesses. Create openings that none of us could create alone. He met Sasuke's eyes steadily, refusing to back down from the hostility he found there. I'm not asking you to like me or respect me. I'm asking you to win. Can you do that? Sasuke's expression flickered, a micro-movement that suggested internal conflict. His pride demanded he refuse, but his drive to succeed, to become stronger, to achieve the vengeance that consumed his every waking thought, demanded that he take every available advantage. In the end, pragmatism won. What do you have in mind? The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Sakura had noticed that Kakashi's apparent omniscience had limits. He could track all 3 genins simultaneously, but his reactions slowed slightly when dealing with coordinated attacks from multiple directions. The key was pressure, constant, relentless pressure from every angle, giving him no chance to use his superior skill to pick them off one by one. Naruto contributed the crucial insight. Kakashi wasn't actually trying to hurt them. His deflections were always just strong enough to redirect attacks, never forceful enough to cause injury. This meant he was handicapping himself, fighting at a fraction of his true capability. They could exploit that. If we make him think one of us is in real danger, Naruto explained as the 3 genin huddled behind a tree, out of Kakashi's direct line of sight. His instinct will be to protect rather than counterattack. That creates an opening. You want one of us to be bait? Sakura asked, her voice uncertain. I'll be bait. Naruto's tone was matter-of-fact. My clones can take hits that would seriously injure you. And I have other abilities that let me minimize risk. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. What abilities? Does it matter? The point is, I can create openings. You two need to be ready to exploit them. The Uchiha stared at him for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to press for more information. In the end, he simply nodded. Fine. Give me a signal when you're ready. Naruto smiled. The execution was chaos disguised as strategy. Naruto created 20 shadow clones, a display of chakra capacity that made Kakashi's visible eye widen slightly, and sent them charging toward the jounin in waves. Each clone attacked with full commitment, drawing Kakashi's attention and response while the original circled for position. At the same time, Sasuke launched a flanking assault, using the clone chaos as cover for his approach. His taijutsu was crisp and precise, targeting the openings that Naruto's clones created through sheer numerical pressure. Sakura hung back, watching for the moment when Kakashi's attention would be divided enough for her to make a move. She had prepared ninja wire, a trap technique they'd covered in their final academy year, and was waiting for the opportunity to deploy it. The battle was furious and brief. Kakashi was clearly surprised by the coordinated assault, his movements becoming more urgent as he dealt with attacks from multiple directions. Clones fell to single strikes, dispersing into clouds of chakra smoke that briefly obscured the battlefield. Sasuke pressed his advantage, forcing the jounin to commit to defensive techniques that left his flanks exposed. Naruto saw his moment. Crack. The world stopped. In the frozen chaos of battle, he moved quickly. Kakashi was mid-motion, one hand deflecting a clone's punch while the other reached towards Sasuke's incoming kick. The bells at his waist were exposed, jingling in the arrested air like tiny chimes. Naruto reached for them. and his hand passed through the Jounin's body without resistance. Clone, he realized with a surge of frustration. He substituted with a clone at some point, and we didn't notice. But where was the real Kakashi? He scanned the frozen battlefield rapidly, searching for any sign of the Jounin's distinctive silver hair. There, at the edge of the clearing, partially concealed behind a tree. The real Kakashi was watching the battle from a safe distance, no doubt evaluating their teamwork while his clone bore the brunt of their assault. Time was running out. 15 seconds left. Naruto sprinted toward the real Kakashi, the weight of frozen time pressing against him like thick water. His legs burned with the effort of moving through the stillness, every step costing more energy than it should. He reached the Jounin with 3 seconds to spare. This was the moment of truth. Could he take the bells from a living person during frozen time, or would contact break the stillness like it had with the bird? Only one way to find out. He grabbed the bells. The stillness shattered instantly, not at his command, but in response to the touch, reality snapping back into motion with an almost violent force. The feedback was immediate and excruciating, a spike of pain behind his eyes that made the old migraines feel like mild discomfort. But his hand was closed around the bells. Kakashi blinked, his expression shifting from composed observation to genuine surprise. What? How did you? Naruto couldn't answer. The pain was too intense, white-hot needles driving into his skull from every direction. He staggered, nearly fell, and only his determination kept him upright. You, Kakashi said slowly, studying him with new intensity. You did something just now. Something I couldn't track. The bells? Naruto managed through gritted teeth. I have the bells. He opened his hand. 2 small silver objects lay in his palm, glinting in the midday sun. Chapter 14, Acknowledgement. The aftermath of the bell test was quieter than Naruto had expected. Kakashi called off the exercise immediately after Naruto presented the bells, his demeanor shifting from languid instructor to serious analyst. He studied the 3 genin with an intensity that belied his usual casual effect, clearly re-evaluating whatever assumptions he had brought to this encounter. You work together, he said finally. That's the real test, you know. The 2 bells, the competitive framing, it's designed to see if you'll tear each other apart for individual advancement, or if you'll recognize that success requires cooperation. We figured that out, Sakura said, her voice tired but proud. Naruto figured it out, actually. Kakashi's eye moved to Naruto, who was sitting against one of the training posts with his head in his hands, waiting for the migraine to subside. Did he? And how did he figure out how to get the bells from me when I was certain no one was close enough to reach them? I have my methods, Naruto said without looking up. His voice was rough, strained by the pain that still pulsed behind his eyes. Does it matter? It matters a great deal. Kakashi crouched down to Naruto's level, bringing his face uncomfortably close. I'm a sensor type, among other things. I can track chakra signatures with considerable precision. And for a moment there, a very brief moment, your signature completely vanished. As if you had ceased to exist. The words hung in the air. Sasuke and Sakura were watching with obvious curiosity, waiting for an explanation that Naruto wasn't sure he was ready to give. I'm going to ask you a question, Kakashi continued, his voice low enough that only Naruto could hear. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Does the Hokage know about this ability of yours? Naruto raised his head, meeting the Jounin's single visible eye. Yes. And he approved you for genin duty, knowing what you can do? Yes. Kakashi was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable behind the mask. Then he straightened and addressed all 3 genin. You pass. As of now, you're officially members of Team 7, under my instruction. We'll begin proper training tomorrow morning. For now, go home and rest, particularly you, Naruto. You look like you've been through a war. The dismissal was abrupt but not unkind. Sakura and Sasuke exchanged glances, clearly wanting more answers but recognizing that this wasn't the moment to push. They departed, leaving Naruto alone with his new sensei. You didn't answer my real question, Kakashi said once the others were out of earshot. What exactly can you do? Naruto looked up at the Jounin, this man who was now responsible for his training, his development, potentially his life on dangerous missions. The secret he had guarded for so long felt suddenly precarious, balanced on a knife's edge between protection and disclosure. I can stop time, he said simply. For a limited duration. It uses chakra and causes this. He gestured at his head, indicating the migraine that was only now beginning to fade. Kakashi absorbed this information without visible reaction. How long? Currently? About 30 seconds. It's been increasing as I train. And the limitations? I can move, but there's resistance, like moving through thick water. I can interact with objects, But touching living things breaks the effect early. The headaches afterwards scale with how much I push the ability. Silence stretched between them. Then Kakashi laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that seemed to catch even him off guard. Of course, he said, shaking his head. Of course the Kyuubi Jinchuriki develops the ability to pause time. Why wouldn't he? The universe clearly has a sense of humor. Is that a problem? A problem? Naruto, if what you're telling me is accurate, you possess an ability that could revolutionize combat tactics. The applications for infiltration alone. He stopped himself, visibly reining in his enthusiasm. But it's also incredibly dangerous. If certain parties learned what you could do, you'd become a target for every village in the elemental nations. I know. Naruto's voice was quiet but firm. That's why I've kept it secret. For how long? Since I was 7. Kakashi stared at him. You've been hiding this ability for 5 years? Training it, developing it, without any guidance or support? The old man, the Hokage, he knows something's going on. He gave me the Shadow Clone Scroll, partly because of it. But I've never told anyone the specifics. Naruto met the Jounin's eye steadily. Until now. The weight of that trust was obvious. Naruto was placing his most precious secret in Kakashi's hands, gambling that this stranger would prove worthy of such confidence. Kakashi was silent for a long time. I won't tell anyone, he said finally. Not without your permission. But I want to help you train it, to push its limits in controlled conditions, to develop tactics that maximize its utility while minimizing its risks. You'd do that? You're my student now. Kakashi's eye crinkled in what was becoming a familiar expression of masked amusement. Helping you grow stronger is literally my job. Besides, he trailed off, something shifting in his visible eye that might have been old pain or distant memory. I knew your father. A long time ago. He would have wanted me to look after you. Naruto's breath caught. You knew my father? Another conversation for another time. The Jounin straightened, his posture returning to its usual relaxed slouch. Go home, Naruto. Rest. We have a lot of work ahead of us. It was a dismissal, but also a promise. Naruto rose on unsteady legs, his migraine finally fading to a manageable ache, and began the walk back to his apartment. He had a team now. A sensei. And for the first time in his life, someone who knew his secret and wanted to help rather than harm. The weight of the forehead protector against his skin felt different than before. It felt like it meant something. Chapter 15. The Foundry of Growth. The weeks following Team 7's formation were a crucible of training and development. Kakashi proved to be a demanding instructor, his lazy demeanor giving way to sharp analysis and rigorous exercises whenever serious work was required. He drilled them in teamwork fundamentals, forced them to run coordination exercises until they could anticipate each other's movements, and pushed them through endurance training that left all 3 genin collapsed and gasping on the forest floor. But with Naruto, he went further. Their private sessions took place in the early morning hours, before the rest of the team arrived, in isolated clearings where discovery was unlikely. Kakashi never used his Sharingan during these sessions. Too recognizable, he explained. If anyone saw me with it uncovered while training alone with you, they'd wonder why. But his natural skills were more than sufficient to test Naruto's capabilities. Activate. Kakashi would command, and Naruto would reach for the stillness. Crack. The world would stop. Naruto would move through the frozen tableau, practicing various applications, reconnaissance, repositioning, setting up attacks, evading incoming strikes that hung motionless in the dead air. Crack. Time would resume, and Kakashi would note what had changed, how Naruto had moved, what opportunities he had seized or missed. Your instinct is to use it defensively, the Jounin observed after one such session. To escape danger rather than create advantage. It saved my life more than once, Naruto admitted. Growing up, people didn't always stop at threats. Kakashi's eye darkened momentarily, a flicker of something that might have been guilt or anger, but his voice remained measured. Defensive applications are valuable. But you have the potential for so much more. Consider, in those 30 seconds you can observe an enemy's position, analyze their stance, identify weaknesses, and set up a killing blow. When time resumes, you could end the fight instantly. I've thought about that. Naruto's voice was quiet. It feels, I don't know, wrong somehow. Like I'd be cheating. There's no such thing as cheating in combat. Kakashi's tone was flat, professional. There's survival and death. Everything else is philosophy for people who've never faced real enemies. It was a harsh perspective, but Naruto understood its truth. The villagers who had attacked him over the years hadn't been concerned with fairness. They'd simply wanted to hurt him. If he'd possessed lethal skills during those encounters, if he'd responded to their violence with his own. He shook off the thought. That wasn't who he wanted to be. Let's try something different, he said instead. I want to test how the ability interacts with shadow clones. This had been a recurring area of experimentation. Naruto had discovered that clones created before activating the stillness remained frozen like everything else. They were physical beings, subject to the same temporal stasis. But clones created during the stillness. Shadow clone jutsu. The chakra divided, and 3 clones materialized in the stopped world. They were frozen. Completely, utterly motionless, despite having been created after the temporal effect began. Naruto studied them with frustration, trying to understand why the technique didn't work as he'd hoped. The clones aren't part of me, he reasoned aloud. They're separate entities, with their own chakra networks. So they're affected by the stillness just like anything else. He dispelled them and tried a different approach. This time, he created the clones first, then instructed them to watch carefully while he activated the ability. If the clones couldn't move during frozen time, at least they could observe what happened when time resumed, providing external perspectives on his actions that might reveal insights he couldn't see himself. Crack. Time stopped. Naruto moved through the stillness, repositioned himself, then released. Crack. The clones blinked in unison. That was weird, one said. You just disappeared. No, he didn't disappear, another corrected. He's right there. He moved. But we didn't see him move. 1 second he was here, the next he was there. Naruto dispersed the clones and absorbed their memories. The external perspective was illuminating. From outside, his ability looked like instantaneous teleportation. No warning, no visual effect, just sudden displacement that defied normal physics. Useful for misdirection, Kakashi commented, having observed the experiment from his frozen state. Opponents won't know what you're doing. They'll just know that you're suddenly somewhere else. And they'll probably assume it's some kind of space-time ninjutsu, Naruto added. Which might make them underestimate the real capabilities. Exactly. The Jounin's eye crinkled with approval. You're thinking like a ninja. Use their assumptions against them. Chapter 16, D-Ranks and Development. Team 7's early missions were, frankly, boring. D-Rank assignments, the lowest tier of shinobi work, consisted primarily of manual labor that genin were assigned to build teamwork and earn pocket money. Catching runaway pets. Weeding gardens. Painting fences. Work that could have been done by civilians, delegated to ninja as a form of hazing that every generation had endured. Naruto bore it with a patience that surprised his teammates. The old Naruto, the loud, attention-seeking prankster who had defined his academy years, would have complained endlessly about such menial tasks. But the new Naruto, tempered by years of private discipline and secret growth, understood the value of patience. D-ranks were unpleasant but temporary. Soon enough, they would graduate to more meaningful work. Besides, the missions provided unexpected training opportunities. During a particularly tedious assignment clearing debris from a construction site, Naruto experimented with using his clones for efficient labor distribution. 20 clones could clear in an hour what would take a single worker all day. The memory feedback from dispersed clones meant he experienced every moment of work they performed, building familiarity with the techniques of physical labor that would prove useful in future situations. During a fence painting mission, he practiced precision chakra control, applying paint in thin, even strokes that required the same fine manipulation that had always eluded him with the standard clone technique. The results were messy at first, but gradual improvement was visible over time. And during a particularly memorable incident involving the demon cat Tora, a creature that seemed determined to escape capture through sheer malevolent cunning, Naruto discovered that his temporal ability worked on animals. The cat was fast. Inhumanly fast, with reflexes honed by years of evading frustrated genin teams. It had already escaped Sakura's grasping hands and dodged Sasuke's ninja wire trap when Naruto finally got close enough to make an attempt. Crack. The world stopped, and Tora hung frozen mid-leap, its eyes wide with the eternal surprise of a creature that had never been caught before. Naruto reached out and gently wrapped his hands around the suspended feline. The stillness shattered, but not immediately. He had perhaps half a second before reality snapped back, just enough time to secure his grip before the cat could react. When time resumed, Tora was already in his arms, yowling with indignation but utterly unable to escape. How did you? Sakura stared in disbelief. That cat has dodged Jounin before. Quick hands, Naruto said with a shrug, hiding his satisfaction. Must have caught it off guard. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, clearly not believing the explanation but equally unable to identify what had actually happened. The Uchiha had been watching Naruto with increasing scrutiny since the bell test, his analytical mind working on the puzzle of his teammates' unexpected capabilities. Naruto made a mental note to be more careful around him. Sasuke was too perceptive to fool forever. Chapter 17, The First True Mission. The assignment to Wave Country came without warning. One moment, Team 7 was standing in the Hokage's office receiving another D-rank assignment. The next, an elderly bridge builder named Tazuna was drunkenly demanding real protection against unspecified threats, and Hirozen was offering them a C-rank mission as a test of their developing skills. Escort duty, Kakashi summarized as they left the village gates behind. We'll be accompanying Tazuna back to his homeland and protecting him while he completes the construction of a major bridge. Standard procedure, no significant threats expected. The lie was obvious to anyone paying attention. Tazuna's nervousness was palpable, the kind of fear that came from someone who knew exactly what dangers awaited but couldn't afford to pay for protection against them. His drinking was excessive even by civilian standards, a transparent attempt to dull anxiety that spiked every time a shadow moved wrong or a bird startled from the underbrush. Naruto noticed. He said nothing. Kakashi noticed. His slouch remained unchanged, but his eye had lost some of its lazy effect, sharpening into the watchfulness of a veteran preparing for conflict. Even Sasuke and Sakura seemed to sense that something was wrong, their bodies tensing as they walked, their eyes scanning the forest with increasing frequency. The attack came on the second day. They were passing a puddle on the road, unremarkable in itself, except that it hadn't rained in over a week and the surrounding earth was bone dry. Naruto spotted it, registered the incongruity, and was already reaching for the stillness when two figures exploded from the water with killing intent that froze his blood. Crack. The world stopped. Two ninja hung in the air before him, their forms frozen mid-leap. They wore gas masks and ragged cloaks, marking them as missing Nin from Hidden Mist, the demon brothers, if Naruto's academy knowledge was correct. Low-level criminals, but dangerous enough to threaten an unprepared genin team. Their chain, a spiked weapon that connected the two fighters into a single combat unit, was extended toward Kakashi, clearly intended to wrap around and shred the jounin before he could react. 30 seconds. Naruto moved quickly, his mind racing through options. He could reposition himself and Sakura, getting them out of the immediate kill zone. He could set up a flanking attack on the immobilized ninja. He could. Wait. Kakashi wasn't frozen. The jounin was moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but definitely moving, through the stillness that had locked everything else in place. His single visible eye was fixed on Naruto, tracking the boy's movements with an expression that might have been surprise or calculation. You can see me, Naruto breathed. Apparently. Kakashi's voice was strange in the dead air, flat and resonanceless like everything else during frozen time. This is unexpected. How are you moving? I have no idea. The jounin's movements were sluggish, far slower than Naruto's own, but undeniably present. The Sharingan can perceive events that happen too quickly for normal vision. Perhaps it's providing some partial resistance to whatever you're doing. There was no time to explore the implications. Naruto turned his attention back to the frozen assassins and began repositioning for combat. By the time he released the stillness, he was behind the demon brothers with a kunai at each of their throats, and Kakashi was standing calmly to the side as if he'd never been in danger at all. The resulting interrogation was brief and brutal. The demon brothers had been hired by someone named Gato to assassinate Tazuna, whose bridge threatened the shipping magnate's stranglehold on Wave Country's economy. The mission had escalated from simple C-rank escort to something far more dangerous, potentially B-rank or higher, depending on what other resources Gato could bring to bear. We should turn back, Sakura said, her voice shaking slightly. This is way beyond what we're prepared for. We'd be abandoning someone who needs our help. Naruto countered. Tazuna hired protection. He's counting on us. He lied about the danger. That's grounds for mission cancellation. He lied because he couldn't afford to pay for the proper rank. Naruto's voice was quiet but firm. His country is suffering under a tyrant's control. He's trying to save his people. If we turn back now, everything he's worked for dies. Sasuke, surprisingly, supported him. The dead last has a point. Besides, stronger enemies mean better training opportunities. Kakashi watched the debate without intervening, his single eye moving between his three students as they argued. Finally, when consensus seemed unreachable, he spoke. We'll continue. But from this point forward, you follow my orders without hesitation. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Understood? The three genin nodded, and Team 7 resumed their journey into Wave Country, and into the crucible that would forge them into true ninja. Chapter 18, The Demon of the Mist. Momochi Zabuza appeared from the fog like a nightmare-given form. He was massive, a wall of muscle and killing intent that dwarfed even Kakashi, his presence seeming to fill the misty clearing where Team 7 had been ambushed. His sword, the executioner's blade, was large enough to serve as a door, its edge gleaming with the promise of violence. Copy Ninja Kakashi. The missing Nin rumbled, his voice carrying the wet rasp of someone accustomed to blood. "I've heard of you. They say your Sharingan has copied over 1,000 jutsu." Kakashi's hand moved to his forehead protector, lifting it to reveal the eye that had been concealed beneath. The Sharingan spun lazily, 3 tomo rotating around a crimson pupil that seemed to absorb the limited light. "Zabuza Momochi," Kakashi replied. "Demon of the Hidden Mist. Former member of the 7 Swordsmen. I've heard of you too. Then you know how this ends." They clashed. Naruto had never seen Jounin-level combat before. The speed was incomprehensible, blurs of motion that his eyes could barely track, techniques executed in the space between heartbeats. Kakashi's Sharingan allowed him to predict and counter Zabuza's movements, but the missing Nin's raw power and combat experience made him a dangerous opponent regardless. Water jutsu filled the clearing. The hidden mist technique rolled in, reducing visibility to arm's length. Naruto found himself pressed against his teammates, the 3 genin forming a protective triangle around Tazuna while their sensei battled an enemy far beyond their capability to fight. Then Kakashi made a mistake. A moment of overextension, a split-second opening, and Zabuza's water prison jutsu trapped the copy ninja in a sphere of chakra-dense water that imprisoned him utterly. "Run!" Kakashi shouted from within his prison. "Take Tazuna and get out of here! You can't fight him!" But Zabuza was already creating a water clone, sending it to pursue if they fled. And there was something in his posture, a confidence born of absolute certainty, that suggested he wouldn't let them escape regardless. "The only way you're leaving this place," the missing Nin said, "is in pieces." Naruto's mind raced. Kakashi was captured, unable to fight. Zabuza's clone was approaching, its killing intent washing over the 3 genin like a physical weight. Sasuke was frozen, his Uchiha pride warring with the primal terror of facing an enemy so far beyond him. Sakura was trembling, her hands gripping a kunai she clearly didn't know how to use. If they ran, they died. If they stayed, they died. Unless... Crack. The world stopped. 30 seconds. Naruto moved immediately, circling Zabuza's frozen clone to study its construction. Water clones were weaker than the original, he knew, vulnerable to sufficient damage, dependent on a continuous chakra connection to their creator. If he could disrupt that connection. But no. The real target was Zabuza himself. If the original was disabled, the clone would disperse automatically. He turned his attention to the missing Nin, noting the position of his hand within the water prison. To maintain the technique, Zabuza had to keep physical contact with the sphere, which meant he was effectively immobilized, unable to dodge or defend against a surprise attack. 20 seconds. Naruto pulled shuriken from his pouch and positioned them carefully. A semicircle of thrown weapons that would impact Zabuza's arm the moment time resumed. If he could force the man to break contact with the prison, Kakashi would be freed. But the throws would be obvious. Zabuza would see them coming, might be able to deflect or dodge despite his restricted movement. He needed a distraction. 15 seconds. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The clones materialized frozen, as expected, but Naruto positioned them in strategic locations around the clearing, behind Zabuza, flanking the water clone, scattered throughout the mist. When time resumed, they would appear simultaneously, creating chaos that might cover the shuriken attack. 10 seconds. One more element. He needed something unexpected, something Zabuza couldn't predict even with all his combat experience. The giant shuriken on his back, a weapon he'd brought more for its intimidating size than any practical application, caught his eye. He drew it, felt its weight in his hands, and positioned himself at an angle that would be impossible to achieve in normal time. 5 seconds. The throw would have to be perfect. The timing would have to be flawless. And he would have to trust that his teammates could exploit whatever opening he created. 3 seconds. He drew back his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles, the potential energy waiting to be released. 1 second. Crack. Everything happened at once. The clones appeared throughout the clearing, shouting battle cries that filled the mist with chaos. The shuriken flew toward Zabuza's arm in a glittering arc. And the giant shuriken, the real attack, the one hidden within the obvious assault, hurtled toward a trajectory that would curve around the water prison and strike Zabuza from behind. The missing Nin reacted with supernatural speed, deflecting the smaller shuriken with his free hand, but the giant weapon caught him off guard. He dodged at the last instant, his hand pulling free of the water prison. And Kakashi was free. Chapter 19, Rising Tides. What followed was a battle that redefined Naruto's understanding of what ninja could do. Kakashi and Zabuza fought across the lake's surface, walking on water as easily as if it were solid ground. Their techniques tore the environment apart, water dragons that crashed against each other with thunderous force, mist so thick it became almost solid, killing intent so dense that even observing from a distance made Naruto's lungs feel heavy. In the end, It was the copy ninja's signature ability that turned the tide. He mimicked Zabuza's own jutsu back at him, the Sharingan predicting movements before they happened, until the missing nin was driven to exhaustion. Then the Senbon came. A masked figure appeared from nowhere, a hunter nin, by the uniform, and drove 2 needles into Zabuza's neck with surgical precision. The demon of the mist collapsed, his massive body hitting the water surface and sinking until only his face remained above the waterline. "Thank you for your assistance," the hunter nin said, his voice young and soft. "I've been tracking Zabuza for months. You've helped me complete my mission." He collected the body and vanished, leaving Team 7 alone on the lake's edge with a terrified bridge builder and 100 unanswered questions. The analysis came later, after they'd reached Tazuna's home and Kakashi had collapsed from chakra exhaustion. "Saban to the neck," Sasuke murmured, his brow furrowed in thought. "That's not a typical killing method for hunter nin. They usually decapitate their targets immediately to preserve the secrets contained in the body." "You think Zabuza's still alive?" Sakura asked, her voice tight with alarm. "I think we should prepare as if he is." Kakashi's voice was weak but steady, emerging from the futon where he lay recovering. "Hunter nin are trained to eliminate missing nin efficiently. That one took the body intact and left without confirming our identities. It's suspicious. So we train." Naruto's voice was flat, already processing the implications. "We have maybe a week before Zabuza is recovered enough to attack again, assuming he survived. We use that time to get stronger." Kakashi's eye, even exhausted, showed a flicker of approval. "Exactly. And I know just the exercise." Chapter 20, Walking on Water. Tree walking was the first step. The technique, using chakra to adhere to surfaces that normal physics would make impossible, was fundamental to ninja mobility. Kakashi explained the principle while lying on his back, too tired to demonstrate but perfectly capable of lecturing. "You emit a constant stream of chakra from the soles of your feet," he said. "Too much, and you'll push yourself away from the surface. Too little, and you won't stick. The key is finding the exact balance point." Sakura mastered it within hours. Her chakra control was excellent, if her reserves were small. Sasuke struggled but made steady progress, his natural talent allowing him to compensate for lack of experience. Naruto failed repeatedly. His chakra surged and twisted, refusing to maintain the steady flow the technique required. He pushed off the tree, he slipped, he fell, over and over, his frustration building with each attempt. "Your reserves are too large," Kakashi observed from his sickbed when Naruto reported his struggles. "The chakra doesn't want to trickle, it wants to flood. You need to learn throttling before you can master adhesion." "How do I do that?" "Practice. There's no shortcut for control, only repetition until your body learns the feel of restricted flow." So Naruto practiced. He created clones and had each one attempt the exercise simultaneously, multiplying his efforts through the memory feedback mechanism that made shadow clones such a powerful training tool. 100 clones meant 100 attempts per minute. Disperse them in staggered groups, and the incoming memories became a flood of failed attempts that gradually revealed the shape of success. By the end of the first day, he was making progress. By the end of the third, he could walk up a tree. By the end of the fifth, he was walking on water. The water walking exercise was similar in principle but far more challenging in execution. Water was fluid, constantly moving, requiring continuous adjustment of chakra output to maintain adhesion. It was the difference between balancing on a stable platform and balancing on a rolling ball, the same core skill, but an entirely different application. Naruto threw himself into the training with manic intensity. Part of it was genuine desire to improve, part of it was the knowledge that Zabuza would return, that his team was in danger, that he needed to be stronger if he wanted to protect anyone. But there was another motivation too, one he barely acknowledged even to himself. He wanted to prove himself. Not to Sasuke, whose arrogance grated against everything Naruto believed. Not to Sakura, whose crush on the Uchiha made her largely oblivious to Naruto's efforts. Not even to Kakashi, who already knew what Naruto was capable of. He wanted to prove himself to himself. All his life, he'd been told he was worthless. A demon. A failure. The dead last of his class, destined to amount to nothing. His secret ability was powerful, yes, but it was still a secret, a hidden advantage that didn't counter the public narrative of his inadequacy. He wanted to show that even without stopping time, even using nothing but ordinary ninja skills, he could stand with the best of his generation. So he trained. And trained. And trained. Chapter 21, The Bridge Builder's Dream. Tazuna's home was modest but warm, filled with the evidence of a family struggling to survive under Gato's tyranny. His daughter Tsunami cooked for the ninja guests with weary gratitude. His grandson Inari watched them with eyes that held no hope. "Why do you even try?" the boy demanded one evening, his voice cracking with the emotion of someone who had lost too much. Gato will kill you. He kills everyone who stands against him. My father tried to be a hero, and now he's dead. The declaration hung in the air, raw and painful. Your father sounds like a brave man, Naruto said quietly. He was stupid, Inari shouted. He thought courage could change things, and it got him killed. There's no such thing as heroes, there's just people who die and people who survive by keeping their heads down. That's not true. How would you know? You're just a dumb ninja from some rich village. You've never suffered like we have. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. Something cold settled in Naruto's chest. I don't know what it's like. His voice was soft, dangerously so. I've been hated since the day I was born. My parents died before I could know them. The entire village I grew up in considers me a monster, something to be feared and despised. I've been beaten, spat on, treated like garbage by people who didn't even know my name. Inari's eyes widened. So yeah, I know something about suffering. But I also know that giving up doesn't make the suffering stop. It just means you suffer while lying down instead of standing up. Naruto stood, his hands clenching at his sides. Your father was brave. He fought for what he believed in, and he inspired other people to fight too. That's what a hero does, not win, not survive, but give others the courage to keep trying. He walked out of the house before anyone could respond, disappearing into the forest night to continue his training. Behind him, a small boy sat in stunned silence, the first crack appearing in the armor of despair he'd built around his heart. Chapter 22, The Return of the Demon. Zabuza's second attack came exactly 1 week after the first. Team 7 had positioned themselves at the bridge, anticipating that Gato's forces would target Tazuna's construction site. Kakashi had recovered enough to fight. The 3 genin had improved their skills significantly during the training period. Preparations had been made. It wasn't enough. The masked hunter Nin, now revealed as Haku, a boy perhaps a year or two older than the genin, possessed a Kekii Genkai that made him nearly unstoppable. Ice release, the ability to create and manipulate ice with devastating precision. His technique, demonic mirroring ice crystals, trapped Sasuke in a dome of ice mirrors from which there was no escape. Naruto arrived at the bridge late, having been delayed defending Tsunami and Inari from mercenaries Gato had sent to take them hostage. By the time he reached the construction site, the battle was already in full chaos, Kakashi and Zabuza locked in combat, Sakura guarding Tazuna, and Sasuke. Sasuke was dying. The Uchiha heir lay at the center of Haku's ice dome, his body pierced by dozens of saban, his breathing shallow and growing weaker. The ice mirrors reflected infinite versions of the masked boy, each one launching needles faster than the eye could track. Naruto didn't think. Crack. The world stopped. The saban hung in the air like frozen rain. The ice mirrors stood motionless, their surfaces still reflecting the terrible beauty of a Kekii Genkai in action. Sasuke's blood was suspended mid-drip, crimson threads connecting his wounds to the pooling stains beneath him. 30 seconds. Naruto moved into the dome, stepping carefully over the frozen needles. He needed to get Sasuke out, to extract his wounded teammate from the kill zone before Haku could finish him off. But the ice mirrors were physical barriers. He tried to push through them and found the weight magnified, as if the frozen water resisted his presence with particular intensity. By the time he'd forced his way through, nearly half his duration had been consumed. 20 seconds. He reached Sasuke and tried to lift him. The contact should have broken the stillness, but somehow it didn't, perhaps because Sasuke was unconscious, or perhaps because the extreme damage to his body had disrupted whatever mechanism made living things resistant to temporal manipulation. Whatever the reason, Naruto was able to drag Sasuke toward the edge of the dome. 15 seconds. The problem was the exit. The mirrors formed a complete enclosure. There was no gap large enough for 2 bodies to pass through without forcing their way past the resistant ice. 10 seconds. Unless he made one. Naruto drew a kunai and pressed it against the base of one mirror, sawing through the frozen surface with desperate intensity. The blade moved slowly through the dense ice, each cut requiring far more effort than it should have. 5 seconds. The cut was complete. A section of ice fell inward, creating a gap just wide enough for a body. 3 seconds. He shoved Sasuke through the opening and followed, tumbling out of the dome just as. Crack. Time resumed. Haku's Sanban completed their flight, striking nothing but empty air where 2 targets had been a moment before. The masked boy's head turned sharply, searching for enemies who had impossibly escaped his perfect trap. What? How did? Naruto was already moving. His body burned with the feedback from an extended activation under stress, pain spiking behind his eyes, but he couldn't stop now. Couldn't rest. Sasuke was dying, and Haku was still a threat, and everything depended on what happened in the next few minutes. You won't touch him again. Naruto growled, settling into a combat stance between Haku and Sasuke's prone form. I won't let you. You care for him. Haku's voice was soft, almost sad. That's beautiful in its way. To have someone precious to you. Someone worth dying for. I'm not dying today. And neither is he. Then I'm sorry. The masked boy raised his hands, forming seals for another technique. Because I cannot let you stop my master's mission. Zabuza-sama needs me. He is my precious person, and I will do anything to help him achieve his goals. The battle resumed. Chapter 23, The Breaking Point. What followed was less a fight than a desperate survival exercise. Haku was faster, more skilled, more experienced in every way that mattered. His ice mirrors reformed around Naruto, trapping him in the same dome that had nearly killed Sasuke. Saban flew from every direction, too many and too fast to dodge, and Naruto felt them pierce his arms, his legs, his torso, painful but not immediately lethal, the masked boy's precision ensuring he could disable without killing. Naruto activated the stillness again and again, repositioning, escaping kill shots, buying himself seconds of survival against an opponent who outclassed him entirely. But each activation cost him, the migraines building on top of each other until his vision swam, and his thoughts began to blur. You're remarkable. Haku observed during a pause in the assault. Whatever you're doing, it's allowing you to survive far longer than you should. But it's clearly costing you something. Your movements are getting slower. Your reactions are deteriorating. I can keep going. For how long? Minutes? An hour? The masked boy shook his head sadly. Everyone has limits. You're reaching yours. He was right. Naruto knew he was right. The accumulated strain of repeated activations was destroying him, each use of the stillness bringing him closer to a breakdown that would leave him helpless before Haku's attacks. But what choice did he have? Run and leave Sasuke to die? Surrender and watch their mission fail? There was no acceptable option. There was only forward, whatever the cost. He prepared for another activation. And something inside him answered. It wasn't the familiar reaching, the grasping toward the deeper layer of chakra that produced the stillness. This was something different. Something older. Something that had been waiting, patient and malevolent, for a moment of desperate need. Red chakra flooded his system. The sensation was overwhelming, power without limit, rage without reason, a furnace of hate that burned away his pain and exhaustion and left nothing but the desire to destroy. Naruto felt his wounds closing, his strength returning, his consciousness fragmenting into something that was him but also not him. The Kyuubi. For the first time in his life, the demon's chakra was responding to his need. Haku sensed the change immediately. His posture shifted from confident hunter to wary prey, his eyes mirrors strengthening as if in response to an existential threat. That chakra, what are you? Naruto didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The red power was consuming his thoughts, narrowing his focus to a single, primal imperative: destroy the threat. He moved. The ice mirrors shattered like glass, unable to contain the force that erupted from his body. Haku dodged desperately, his Kekkei Genkai pushed to its limits, but even his supernatural speed couldn't match the demon-enhanced assault. A blow connected, Naruto's fist, wreathed in crimson chakra, driving into Haku's mask with force that sent the boy flying backward. The porcelain shattered, revealing a face that was young and delicate and utterly shocked. You! Haku coughed blood, struggling to rise. You're like me. A tool forged by others' hatred. The words cut through the red haze, reaching some fragment of Naruto's consciousness that still remembered itself. I'm not a tool. But you are. Haku's smile was sad, accepting. Weapons like us. We exist only to serve our masters. Our value is in our utility, not in ourselves. That's not true. Then why do you fight? Not for yourself, I can see that. For your team. For your village. For a place that has only shown you cruelty. Haku rose to his feet, swaying but determined. We're the same, you and I. Except I've accepted what I am, and you're still pretending to be something more. Naruto felt the red chakra surging, demanding he strike, demanding he end this conversation with violence. But something in Haku's words had reached him, had awakened a question he'd been avoiding for years. Why did he fight for Konoha? The village had treated him as a monster. Had denied him friendship, family, basic human dignity. Had blamed him for atrocities committed before he was born, punished him for crimes he never committed. And yet, Iruka had believed in him. The third Hokage had supported him. Kakashi was teaching him, investing in his growth, treating him as a valuable student rather than a dangerous liability. Sasuke and Sakura, for all their flaws, were his teammates, people who fought alongside him, who would die for the mission they shared. Konoha wasn't the villagers who spat on him. It was also the people who didn't. You're wrong. Naruto said, his voice steadying as he pushed back against the demon's influence. I'm not fighting for the village that hurt me. I'm fighting for the village that could be, the one that treats everyone with respect, where no one has to grow up alone and hated. I'm fighting to make that village real. A dream. Maybe. But dreams are worth fighting for. The red chakra receded slightly, its rage tempered by purpose. Naruto felt his control returning, his thoughts clarifying, his humanity reasserting itself against the demon's influence. He looked at Haku, this boy who had chosen to be a weapon, who had surrendered his identity to serve a master who would use him until he was broken, and felt something unexpected. Pity. You could choose differently. Naruto said. You could be more than a tool. Perhaps. Haku's smile didn't change. But it's too late for me. Zabuza-sama is fighting Kakashi, and I can sense he's losing. If I don't intervene. He moved. Faster than before, faster than Naruto could track even with his enhanced reflexes. The masked boy blurred across the bridge, racing toward where Kakashi and Zabuza still battled in the mist. And Naruto, exhausted, depleted, barely functional, could only watch him go. Chapter 24, The Cost of Victory. The battle ended not with triumph but with tragedy. Kakashi's lightning blade pierced Haku's chest. The boy had thrown himself between Zabuza and certain death, accepting the killing blow meant for his master. The copy ninja's face twisted with shock and horror as he withdrew his arm from the corpse of a child. Zabuza. Zabuza did nothing. He stood frozen, his sword lowered, staring at the body of the tool he had claimed to see as nothing more than a weapon. And in his eyes, visible even through the bandages that wrapped his face, Naruto saw something that might have been grief. Told you he was soft. A voice called from the far end of the bridge. Sentimental fool. That's why I hired backup. Gato emerged from the mist, surrounded by an army of mercenaries that stretched back into the fog. 100 men, maybe more, armed and ready to kill whoever remained alive. Thanks for wearing each other out. The shipping magnate continued, his voice oily with satisfaction. Now my boys will finish the job, and I won't have to pay any of you. He gestured at Zabuza with contempt. Including you, demon? Did you really think I'd honor our contract? You're a missing nin. Your word is worth less than dirt. The mercenaries laughed. Gato laughed. Zabuza did not laugh. Boy, the demon of the mist said, not looking away from Gato's smirking face. Give me a kunai. Naruto didn't hesitate. He threw the weapon, watching it spin through the air until Zabuza caught it with casual precision. Kakashi. Watch my back. Then he moved. The former swordsman of the mist cut through the mercenary army like a blade through water. He killed with mechanical efficiency, his wounds bleeding freely, his body failing more with each step. But he didn't stop. Didn't slow. Kept moving forward through the screaming, dying mass of men who stood between him and the architect of Haku's death. Gato tried to run. He didn't get far. By the time Zabuza reached him, the missing nin was more corpse than man, dozens of wounds from mercenaries' desperate attacks, blood streaming from places that shouldn't bleed. But his hand was steady as he drove the kunai into Gato's throat, and his smile was peaceful as he watched the light fade from the tyrant's eyes. Then he fell. Naruto reached him first, kneeling beside the fallen demon with something that felt like respect. This man had been his enemy, had tried to kill his team, had served a monster for money. But in the end, he had chosen something better. The boy. Zabuza rasped, his voice barely audible. Haku. I never told him what he really meant to me. I think he knew. You think so? The dying man's eyes found Naruto's, seeking reassurance that was beyond his ability to give. Even though I treated him like a tool? Even though I pretended not to care? He called you precious. Naruto's voice was steady despite the tears that threatened to fall. He died for you. He knew. Zabuza's breath rattled in his chest. Strange. I always thought dying would feel worse. But this. His eyes drifted to where Haku's body lay, cold and still in the thinning mist. Being here, with him. It's not so bad. He said nothing more. The demon of the mist died with his hand reaching toward the boy who had loved him, and the bridge fell silent except for the sound of the waves below. Chapter 25, Homecoming. The journey back to Konoha was quiet. The mission had succeeded, Tazuna's bridge was complete, Wave Country was free from Gato's tyranny, and the immediate threat had been eliminated. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the deaths of Haku and Zabuza, by the cost that combat always demanded. Sasuke walked with new awareness in his eyes. The Sharingan had awakened during his near-death experience, unlocking the bloodline limit that was his heritage. But the power came with memories of helplessness, of lying broken while an enemy decided whether he lived or died. Sakura was shaken but intact, her illusions about the glamour of ninja life stripped away by exposure to real violence. She would either grow from this experience, or be crushed by it. Only time would tell. And Naruto. Naruto walked with the weight of secrets pressing down on his shoulders. The Kyuubi had responded to him during the battle. Its chakra had saved his life, had given him the power to survive when his own abilities had failed. But that power came with a price, a connection to the demon that he didn't understand and couldn't control. He needed answers. And there was only one person who might be able to provide them. Chapter 26, Revelations. The Hokage's office was warm and familiar, filled with the scent of pipe tobacco and the quiet rustling of paperwork. Hiruzen looked up as Naruto entered, his aged eyes taking in the boy's exhausted appearance with careful concern. "I heard about Wave Country," the old man said. "Kakashi's report was thorough. You did well, Naruto. I lost control." The words came out flat, carrying the weight of everything Naruto had been holding in since the battle. "During the fight with Haku, I pushed too hard, used up everything I had, and then, something else took over. Red chakra. Power that wasn't mine." Hiruzen set down his pipe. His expression shifted, becoming serious in a way that Naruto rarely saw from the usually gentle old man. "You felt the Kyuubi's chakra?" "Yes." Naruto met the Hokage's eyes directly. "And I need to know what that means. I need to understand what's inside me." Silence stretched between them. Then Hiruzen spoke. 12 years ago, on the night you were born, the nine-tailed fox attacked Konoha. It was the most powerful of the tailed beasts, a force of destruction that killed hundreds and would have killed thousands more if it hadn't been stopped. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, gave his life to defeat it. But the Kyuubi couldn't be killed, only contained. So he sealed it inside the only vessel that could possibly hold such power, a newborn infant whose chakra coils were still flexible enough to adapt to the demon's presence. That infant was you, Naruto. The words landed like physical blows. Naruto had suspected something like this. The villagers' hatred, the whispered accusations of demon, the strange chakra that had awakened during his desperate moment. But hearing it confirmed, hearing the full truth for the first time. "I'm a Jinchuriki." "Yes." "The container for the nine-tailed fox." Hiruzen's voice was gentle but firm. "The fourth hoped that you would be seen as a hero, the prison that protected the village from the demon's return. Instead I became the demon in everyone's eyes." "Yes." The old man's eyes held centuries of sorrow. "I tried to protect you from that truth, to let you live a normal childhood for as long as possible. But perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps you needed to understand what you were carrying." Naruto processed this slowly, feeling the pieces of his life rearranging themselves into a new pattern. The hatred. The isolation. The strange power that had awakened during his desperate moment. It all made sense now, terrible, painful sense. "My ability," he said finally. "The time-stopping. Is that connected to the Kyuubi?" "I don't know." Hiruzen's response was honest. "Nothing in our records suggests that Jinchuriki should develop such abilities. Your power appears to be something unique, perhaps influenced by the demon's presence, but not directly caused by it. So I'm a freak even among freaks. You're a young man with extraordinary potential." The Hokage's voice sharpened. "What you do with that potential is your choice, not the village's, not the demon's, yours. The Kyuubi is a part of you now, but it doesn't define you. Only your actions can do that." The words echoed in Naruto's mind as he left the office, carrying a truth that was both burden and liberation. He understood now why the villagers feared him, why his childhood had been so cruel, why he had always felt separated from the world by an invisible barrier. The barrier was real. It was a demon sealed inside his gut. But it wasn't insurmountable. The fourth Hokage had believed he could become a hero. Hiruzen believed he could choose his own path. Kakashi, Iruka, his teammates, all of them were investing in his growth, his potential, his future. Maybe the villagers were wrong about him. Maybe he could prove them wrong. The thought was fragile, easily shattered, but Naruto held onto it with both hands as he walked through Konoha's streets, a monster in the eyes of many, but something more in his own. Chapter 27, The Path Forward. In the weeks following Wave Country, Naruto threw himself into training with renewed intensity. The encounter with Haku had exposed his limitations. His temporal ability was powerful, but it had a ceiling. Repeated activations under stress had nearly destroyed him. If he'd faced a stronger opponent, if the battle had lasted longer, he might have died. He needed to expand that ceiling. Kakashi helped where he could, designing exercises that pushed Naruto's duration and recovery toward their limits without crossing into dangerous territory. But the Jounin's time was limited by other duties, and there were aspects of Naruto's ability that no one else could train. So he trained himself. The Shadow Clone Multiplier effect became his primary tool. 100 clones, each one pushing the stillness for as long as possible, provided 100 data points per session. When they dispersed, Naruto absorbed their collective experience, a flood of sensation and observation that taught him more in hours than he could have learned in months of solo practice. His duration crept upward. 30 seconds became 35. 35 became 40. The curve was steepening now, his body's adaptation accelerating as he approached whatever genetic limit defined his maximum potential. But the Kyuubi's chakra remained a problem. It lurked beneath his awareness, red and hungry, waiting for another moment of weakness to surge forward. Naruto could feel it during intense training sessions, a pressure against the seal, a whisper of power that promised everything and asked only that he surrender control. He refused. Every time, he refused. The demon was a tool he didn't know how to use safely. Until he understood it better, he wouldn't risk letting it take over again. Chapter 28, Chunin Exams Announcement. The notification came on a crisp autumn morning, delivered by a hawk that circled the training ground where Team 7 was practicing. The Chunin Selection Exams. Kakashi read aloud, scanning the scroll's contents. Open to all genin who have completed at least 8 missions, including a minimum of 1 C rank. The exams will be held in Konoha in 3 weeks' time. Sakura's eyes widened. Already? But we've only been genin for a few months. The exam is challenging but not impossible for talented rookies. Kakashi's eye crinkled in what might have been amusement. I'm nominating all 3 of you. Whether you choose to participate is up to you. Sasuke's response was immediate. I'll participate. Me too, Naruto added, his voice carrying quiet determination. Sakura hesitated, then nodded. If both of you are going, I can't be left behind. Then it's settled. Kakashi handed each of them a registration form. Fill these out and report to the academy on the day of the first exam. And remember, this isn't like academy tests. People die in the Chunin exams. If you're not prepared to risk everything, withdraw now. None of them withdrew. The 3 weeks of preparation were a blur of training and tactical planning. Team 7's strengths were becoming clearer with each passing day. Sasuke was their close combat specialist, his newly awakened Sharingan allowing him to read and predict enemy movements with uncanny precision. Sakura was their analyst, her intelligence and chakra control making her invaluable for identifying threats and coordinating team responses. And Naruto. Naruto was their wild card. His temporal ability remained secret from everyone except Kakashi and the Hokage, but his other skills, the shadow clones, the gradually improving taijutsu, the sheer stubbornness that refused to acknowledge defeat, were publicly known. Opponents would underestimate him based on his academy reputation, and that underestimation would be their downfall. He spent the preparation period refining his techniques. The Springtrap combat style had evolved into something more sophisticated. Where before he had simply repositioned and struck, now he set up multi-layered attacks, clones positioned for flanking assaults, weapons placed in strategic locations, environmental hazards identified and prepared for exploitation. In frozen time, he could prepare the battlefield to his exact specifications. When time resumed, the prepared traps would spring simultaneously, overwhelming opponents who had no idea they'd been walking into an ambush. It was unfair. It was underhanded. It was exactly what a ninja should do. Chapter 29, First Exam. The written test was a trap. This became obvious to Naruto within the first minute of reading the questions. The problems were Jounin level, requiring specialized knowledge that no genin could reasonably possess. Chapter 30, Forest of Death. The second exam was survival. Training Ground 44, the Forest of Death, stretched before them like a primordial nightmare, trees that blocked out the sun, sounds that suggested predators far larger than any normal animal, and an atmosphere of danger that pressed against the skin like humid air. The rules were simple. Each team received either a Heaven Scroll or an Earth Scroll. To pass, they needed to obtain both scrolls and reach the tower at the forest center within 5 days. How they obtained the second scroll, combat, negotiation, theft, was entirely up to them. Team 7 received an Earth Scroll. We need a Heaven Scroll. Kakashi had briefed them before the exam. That means engaging at least one other team. Be careful about who you target. Some of the foreign participants are Jounin level in all but name. The forest closed around them like a living thing. The first attack came within hours. A team from Amegakure, Rain Ninja, 3 of them, wearing masks that covered their faces entirely, emerged from the shadows with killing intent that was palpable even before they spoke. Konoha Genin, the leader said, his voice rasping through the mask's filter. Give us your scroll and we'll let you live. How do you know we have the scroll you need? Sakura asked, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. We don't. But we'll take whatever you have and trade it if necessary. Sasuke's hand moved toward his weapon pouch. Naruto shifted his weight, preparing for combat. Last chance, the Rain Ninja said. Scroll or blood? Crack. The world stopped. Naruto moved immediately, circling to assess the enemy positions. The three rain ninja were arranged in a triangle formation, their postures suggesting experience with coordinated assaults. Their masks made it difficult to read their expressions, but their stances revealed enough. The leader was the most dangerous, the flankers were there for support and harassment. 40 seconds now. He'd pushed past the 40-second barrier during his preparation training. He positioned himself behind the leader, drawing a kunai and placing it against the man's neck. Then he moved to each of the flankers, setting up restraints that would activate the moment time resumed. Ninja wire looped around their ankles, ready to tighten and trip them. 30 seconds. He returned to his original position, making sure his displacement wouldn't be immediately noticeable. 20 seconds. One more element. He created 2 shadow clones and positioned them at the flanks, ready to capitalize on the confusion he'd prepared. 10 seconds. The setup was complete. Now to execute. Crack. Everything happened at once. The leader felt cold metal against his throat and froze, his attack dying in the recognition that he was already dead if his opponent chose to strike. The flankers stepped forward to help the leader, and tripped on wires they couldn't see coming, sprawling face first into the underbrush. Naruto's clones materialized from nothing, slamming into the fallen ninja before they could recover. In less than 3 seconds, the battle was over. "Your scroll," Naruto said, his kunai still pressed against the leader's throat. "Now." The rain ninja complied. Heaven's scroll acquired, Team 7 continued toward the tower with renewed confidence. Chapter 31: The Snake in the Forest. The second attack was different. There was no warning, no posturing, no demands, no opportunity to prepare. One moment Team 7 was moving through the forest, alert but not alarmed. The next, a wave of killing intent washed over them that made the rain ninja's threat seem like a child's tantrum. Naruto's body locked in place, paralyzed by a fear so profound it felt like dying. "Such promising children!" A voice hissed from everywhere and nowhere. "Let's see what you're really made of." The snake that emerged from the shadows was massive, a summoned creature of legendary scale, its coils thick enough to crush buildings. On its head stood a figure in sound ninja garb, their face pale and their eyes the color of sickness. "Orochimaru," Sasuke breathed, his voice tight with recognition and terror. "One of the Sannin. You know me." The figure's smile was a wound in their face. "Good. Then you know what I'm capable of." Naruto fought against the paralysis, reaching for the stillness. And found nothing. His ability refused to respond. The fear, the killing intent, the overwhelming presence of a predator so far beyond him, something in that combination had broken his concentration, had severed the connection to the deeper chakra layer he needed to access. He was helpless. Orochimaru's attention fixed on Sasuke with predatory focus. "The last Uchiha. Your eyes are quite valuable, you know. I've been wanting a Sharingan for quite some time. Stay away from him!" Naruto shouted, forcing his body to move through sheer willpower. The fear remained, crushing and absolute, but beneath it was something stronger, the determination that had carried him through a childhood of hatred, the resolve that refused to surrender no matter the odds. The snake Sannin's eyes shifted to him. "And what's this?" "A Jinchuriki, if I'm not mistaken. The Nine-Tails container." Their smile widened. "How interesting. Perhaps I should study you as well." They moved. Naruto didn't see the attack. He felt it, a blur of motion, an impact against his stomach, a searing pain that was followed by something worse. Orochimaru's fingers pressed against his abdomen, chakra surging in a pattern that felt like violation. "Five-pronged seal," the Sannin whispered. "That should keep the fox quiet while I deal with your teammate." Naruto's world went dark. Chapter 32: Awakening. Consciousness returned in fragments. Pain first, a deep, bone-level ache centered on his stomach where Orochimaru's technique had landed. Then awareness of his surroundings, a hollow tree, dim light filtering through gaps in the bark, the sound of combat somewhere nearby. "Naruto!" Sakura's face swam into focus, her expression tight with worry. "You're awake!" "Thank gods. Orochimaru did something to you, some kind of seal. Sasuke's been fighting him alone, but he's—" An explosion interrupted her. The ground shook with its force, accompanied by the distinctive crackle of fire techniques. "I have to help him." Naruto tried to rise and found his body unresponsive. The seal on his stomach was visible now, a 5-pointed design that glowed with malevolent chakra. Whatever Orochimaru had done, it was suppressing something vital. His temporal ability. He reached for the stillness and felt only emptiness. The connection he'd cultivated for 5 years was gone, blocked by the foreign seal that squatted on his chakra network like a parasite. "I can't." The words caught in his throat. "I can't access my abilities. That seal. We'll figure it out later." Sakura's voice was steady despite her obvious fear. Right now, Sasuke needs help. Can you move at all? Naruto forced his limbs to respond through sheer stubbornness. Every movement hurt, every step felt like walking through tar, but he refused to let that stop him. Sasuke was his teammate, his rival, someone who was counting on him even if either of them would ever admit it. He staggered toward the sounds of battle. The scene he found was nightmare given form. Sasuke was losing. The Uchiha heir fought with everything he had, Sharingan spinning, fire techniques blazing, taijutsu that would have overwhelmed any opponent of similar rank, but Orochimaru batted his attacks aside like inconveniences. The Snake Sannin was toying with him, testing his limits, pushing him towards some breaking point that only they could see. Good, Orochimaru murmured, dodging a grand fireball with casual grace. But not yet good enough. You need motivation. They moved too fast to track. When Naruto's vision cleared, Sasuke was screaming. Orochimaru had bitten him, actually bitten him, teeth sinking into the junction of neck and shoulder, and something was happening where those teeth had pierced flesh. A mark was spreading across Sasuke's skin, dark patterns that pulsed with malevolent energy. My gift to you, the Sannin said, withdrawing with blood on their lips. The curse mark. It will make you strong, strong enough to satisfy your hatred, strong enough to kill the brother you despise. Sasuke collapsed, his body convulsing with the foreign power invading his system. You'll come to me eventually. Orochimaru continued, their form already beginning to sink into the tree behind them. When you're hungry enough for power. When you realize that Konoha can't give you what you truly want. Then they were gone, leaving behind a forest scarred by combat, and 2 broken genin in the hands of a teammate who couldn't save them. Chapter 33, Survival. The next 72 hours were hell. Sasuke lay unconscious, his body racked with fevers as the curse mark worked its way into his system. Sakura kept watch, her medical training barely sufficient to maintain his vital signs. And Naruto fought. The Sound Ninja came on the second day, 3 of them, sent by Orochimaru to either test Sasuke's survival or eliminate the witnesses. They were skilled, confident, utterly certain of their superiority over a pair of battered genin. They were wrong. Without his temporal ability, Naruto was forced to rely on raw combat skill, the positioning, the tactics, the physical conditioning he developed over years of secret training. His clones bought time, his traps created opportunities. His sheer refusal to fall kept the battle going until help arrived. The help came in unexpected forms. Rock Lee, the taijutsu specialist from Team Guy, appeared like a green whirlwind, his speed and power overwhelming the Sound Ninja's initial assault. Behind him came his teammates, Neji Hyuga with his Byakugan and gentle fist, Tenten with her weapon mastery. And then Sasuke woke up. The curse mark had fully activated, covering half his body with its dark patterns. His chakra was wrong, tainted, corrupted, carrying an edge of violence that hadn't been there before. He moved with power that exceeded anything he'd previously demonstrated, dismantling the remaining Sound Ninja with brutal efficiency. It wasn't until after the battle, when the curse seal retreated and Sasuke collapsed again, that Naruto realized how close they'd all come to dying. Chapter 34, The Tower. They reached the tower on the 5th day. The preliminary matches began immediately. Too many teams had passed the forest portion, necessitating elimination rounds before the final tournament. Each bout was one-on-one, winner advancing, loser going home. Naruto's match was against Kiba Inuzuka. The Inuzuka clan specialized in partnership with ninja hounds. Kiba's companion, Akamaru, was as much a combatant as Kiba himself. Their teamwork was seamless, their combination attacks designed to overwhelm opponents through coordinated assault. Against a normal genin, they would have won easily. But Naruto wasn't normal. During the 5 days in the forest, he had studied the seal Orochimaru had placed on him, probing its edges with the limited chakra awareness he'd developed over years of training. The 5-pronged seal was a sophisticated technique, designed to disrupt the interaction between a Jinchuriki and their tailed beast. But Naruto's temporal ability wasn't connected to the Kyuubi. It was a deeper layer of his own chakra that the seal hadn't been designed to block. By the 3rd day, he had figured out how to work around it. The connection wasn't as clean as before. The stillness came reluctantly, lasting only 15 seconds rather than his pre-seal 40. But 15 seconds was more than enough. Crack. Kiba and Akamaru froze mid-combination attack. Naruto moved efficiently, positioning himself behind Kiba and setting up the finishing blow. He had practiced this scenario countless times during his original training, the spring trap, the instant counterattack, the victory that came from nowhere. Crack. His fist connected with the back of Kiba's head before the Inuzuka even knew he moved. The match was over. Chapter 35, Preliminaries. The remaining preliminary matches were a showcase of Konoha's newest generation. Sasuke fought a Sound Ninja named Zaku, his curse mark flaring dangerously before he managed to suppress it. The victory was decisive but costly. His body was clearly struggling with the foreign power, and his teammates watched with worry they couldn't fully express. Sakura faced Ino Yamanaka, her childhood friend and rival. Their battle was a clash of wills as much as skills, ending in a double knockout that eliminated both competitors. And in the match that defined the preliminaries, Hinata Hyuga faced her cousin Neji. The Hyuga clan's internal conflict played out in brutal fashion. Neji's hatred, for the main branch, for the system that had killed his father, for everything the clan represented, drove him to attack his younger cousin with lethal intent. Hinata, gentle and uncertain, fought back with a courage that surprised everyone who had dismissed her as weak. She lost. Neji's final attack would have killed her if the proctors hadn't intervened. As medics rushed to stabilize the injured girl, Neji turned his cold eyes toward the watching genin and spoke words that chilled the blood. Fate is immutable. People are born with their destinies sealed. A failure will always be a failure, no matter how hard they try. The words hit Naruto like a physical blow. You're wrong, he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly across the arena. Destiny doesn't determine who we become. Our choices do. Neji's smile was contemptuous. Spoken like someone who doesn't understand the real world. Let me show you how wrong you are, when we face each other in the finals. The challenge hung in the air, a promise of conflict that would test everything Naruto believed. He accepted it. Chapter 36 1 month. The break between preliminaries and finals was 1 month, 4 weeks to train, recover, and prepare for the battles ahead. Naruto's first priority was the seal. The 5-pronged seal was still suppressing his full capabilities, limiting his temporal ability to a fraction of its potential. He needed someone skilled enough to remove it, someone who understood sealing techniques at a level far beyond what Konoha's standard resources could provide. The third Hokage provided the solution. Jiraiya of the Sannin has agreed to train you during the preparation period, Hiruzen informed Naruto during their meeting. He's one of the few living sealing masters who could safely remove what Orochimaru placed on you. Jiraiya? The one who writes those books? Among other things. The Hokage's expression suggested a long and complicated history with the legendary ninja. He's also my former student, one of the most powerful shinobi alive, and the only person I trust to help you with this particular problem. The meeting took place the next day. Jiraiya was tall, white-haired, and exactly as eccentric as his reputation suggested. His first words to Naruto were a critique of his stance. His second were an offer to introduce him to research subjects at the local bathhouse. But beneath the perverted exterior was a mind of terrifying depth. 5-pronged seal, huh? The Sannin examined Naruto's stomach with clinical detachment. Orochimaru's work. Nasty piece of business. Meant to disrupt the connection between Jinchuriki and Tailed Beast. It's also blocking something else, Naruto said. An ability I have that isn't related to the Kyuubi. Jiraiya's eyes sharpened. Oh? What kind of ability? Naruto hesitated. This was the third person he told, after the Hokage and Kakashi, but each disclosure felt like a risk. One wrong word, one betrayed confidence, and his greatest secret could become public knowledge. But Jiraiya was vouched for by the Hokage himself. And Naruto needed the seal removed. I can stop time, he said. For a limited duration. The seal is interfering with my ability to access it. Silence. Then Jiraiya began to laugh, a great, booming sound that seemed completely at odds with the gravity of the revelation. Of course you can, he said when he'd composed himself. Of course Minato's son can do something impossible. Why would it be anything else? You knew my father? Knew him? Kid, I trained him. Jiraiya's expression softened into something approaching fondness. He was the closest thing I ever had to a son. And you're more like him than you realize. The words opened doors that Naruto had kept carefully closed. Questions about his heritage, his family, the legacy he'd never known, they all threatened to spill out in a flood of desperate curiosity. But there wasn't time for that now. The seal, he said, forcing himself to focus. Can you remove it? Easily. Jiraiya cracked his knuckles. Let's get started. Chapter 37, Breaking Chains. The seal removal was painful but quick. Jiraiya's hands blazed with chakra as he applied the counter technique, his voice steady as he explained what he was doing. The 5-pronged seal works by disrupting chakra flow at specific meridian points. To remove it, I need to realign those points, essentially performing the opposite of what Orochimaru did. Each point's realignment sent fire through Naruto's nervous system. But when the last one was complete, when the foreign seal dissolved like morning frost in sunlight, the relief was beyond words. His temporal ability surged back to full strength, the connection to that deeper layer restored as if it had never been severed. Crack. The world stopped. Naruto exhaled in the perfect silence, feeling the familiar weight of frozen air against his skin. He was back. He was whole. The month ahead would be enough to recover his lost progress and push even further. Crack. Impressive, Jiraiya said, having observed the brief activation. You vanished for almost a second there. How long can you hold it? About 40 seconds at my best. I was at 15 while the seal was active. And the cost? Migraines if I push too hard. Fatigue if I use it repeatedly without rest. Jiraiya nodded slowly, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Your father would have loved to study this ability. He was fascinated by space-time techniques, created the Flying Thunder God, you know. The fastest teleportation jutsu ever developed. Is my ability related to that? Hard to say. The Flying Thunder God manipulates space, your ability seems to manipulate time. Different mechanisms, but perhaps similar origins. The Sannin shrugged. Something to explore later. For now, we have more practical concerns. The training began. Chapter 38. The Sage's Lessons. Jiraiya's training regimen was nothing like Naruto had experienced before. Where Kakashi had focused on practical applications, the Sannin emphasized fundamentals, chakra control exercises that pushed Naruto's mediocre skills toward competence, physical conditioning that built endurance and strength, and combat drills that refined his taijutsu from functional to formidable. Your temporal ability is powerful, Jiraiya explained during one of their sessions. But you're using it as a crutch. What happens when you face someone who can counter it? When the migraines leave you unable to activate? You need to be dangerous even without your trump card. The criticism was fair. Naruto had invested so much in developing his temporal abilities that his conventional ninja skills had lagged behind. His teammates had assumed he was catching up naturally. In reality, he'd been using the stillness to compensate for deficiencies that remained unaddressed. So he trained. Morning exercises pushed his physical limits. Afternoon sessions refined his chakra control. Evening work focused on combat techniques, both with and without temporal enhancement. And in the gaps between, Jiraiya taught him something far more valuable. The Rasengan, the Sannin said, producing a sphere of spiraling chakra in his palm. Your father's signature technique. A rank pure shape manipulation, no elemental component. It took him 3 years to develop and another year to master. And you want me to learn it in a month? I want you to learn the principles behind it. Jiraiya let the sphere dissipate. The Rasengan requires 3 things: rotation, power, and containment. Master those, and the technique becomes possible. Fail to master them, and you'll just be spinning chakra uselessly. The training was brutal. Rotation came first, using rubber balls to practice the spinning motion that formed the technique's foundation. Then power, bursting those balls through sheer chakra pressure. Finally, containment, holding the rotating power in a sphere that didn't collapse or explode. By the second week, Naruto could form a crude Rasengan. By the third, he could use it in combat. By the fourth, he had combined it with his shadow clone technique, using a clone's hands to help contain the spiraling chakra while the original provided the power and rotation. It's a workaround, Jiraiya acknowledged, watching Naruto demolish training dummies with his imperfect technique. Eventually you'll need to do it one-handed. But for now, it's enough. Enough to beat Neji? Enough to surprise him. The Sannin's expression grew serious. But victory isn't guaranteed, kid. The Hyuga clan has been refining their combat style for centuries. Neji is a prodigy even among prodigies. Don't underestimate him. Naruto nodded, filing the warning away. He had 1 week left. 1 week to prepare for the battle that would test everything he'd learned, everything he'd become, everything he believed about the nature of destiny and choice. He would be ready. Chapter 39, Tournament Day. The stadium was packed. Thousands of spectators filled the arena's tiered seating, their voices creating a constant background roar that Naruto could feel in his bones. Feudal lords, village leaders, wealthy merchants, the Chunin exam finals drew audiences from across the elemental nations, everyone eager to see the next generation of ninja demonstrate their skills. The 8 finalists stood in the center of the arena, facing the Hokage's viewing box where Sarutobi Hiruzen sat alongside the visiting Kazekage from Sunigakure. The old man's expression was proud as he surveyed the young ninja before him. You represent the best of your villages. Hiruzen's voice echoed through the stadium, enhanced by some chakra technique. Today, you will demonstrate your skills before the world. Fight with honor. Fight with courage. And show everyone what it means to be a shinobi. The crowd roared. The first match was Uzumaki Naruto vs. Hyuga Neji. Chapter 40, Fate and Choice. Neji entered the arena with the absolute confidence of someone who had already won. Forfeit, he said as they faced each other in the center of the stadium. You cannot defeat me. Your fate was sealed the moment you were matched against a Hyuga. Funny thing about fate. Naruto replied, settling into his combat stance. It only seems inevitable until someone proves it wrong. You speak of things you don't understand. Neiji's Byakugan activated, veins bulging around his pale eyes. I can see your chakra network. I can see every weakness, every opening, every flaw in your pathetic technique. You are nothing but a failure who got lucky in the preliminaries. Maybe. But I'm a failure who doesn't give up. The proctor's signal dropped. Neji moved first, a blur of speed that would have overwhelmed most genin. His gentle fist targeted Naruto's chakra points with surgical precision, each strike designed to seal away his opponent's ability to use jutsu. Naruto dodged. Not perfectly, several strikes grazed his arms, numbing the tissue where they connected, but enough to avoid the killing pattern Neji was weaving. His training with Jiraiya had focused heavily on evasion against precision fighters. The Sannin had even hired a Hyuga tutor to demonstrate the gentle fist's principles. You're faster than your file suggests, Neji observed, adjusting his approach. But it won't matter. The 8 trigrams 64 palms will end this. He began the technique. The assault was a storm of targeted strikes, each one seeking a specific chakra point in Naruto's network. Normal opponents would have been completely shut down within the first 16 palms, their ability to use chakra eliminated entirely. Naruto survived. He survived because he activated the stillness the moment Neji committed to the technique. Crack. The world stopped. Neiji's hand was frozen an inch from Naruto's chest, his expression locked in concentration. The crowd was motionless, their cheers suspended in mid-cry. The sunlight itself seemed to have solidified, rays of illumination become solid bars of gold. 45 seconds. Naruto had pushed past his previous limit during the month of training, his recovery from the 5-pronged seal apparently triggering a growth spurt in his temporal capabilities. Almost a full minute of frozen time, an eternity in combat. He moved. Not to attack Neji directly. Touching the Hyuga would break the stillness, and he needed every second to set up what came next. Instead, he repositioned, created shadow clones, and began preparing the arena for his counteroffensive. When he released the technique, Neji found himself surrounded. Naruto and his clones attacked from every direction simultaneously, a coordinated assault that forced the Hyuga to abandon his offensive and focus on defense. The gentle fist was devastating against single opponents, but it required time and precision, both of which were denied when attacks came from multiple angles at once. How are you doing this? Neji demanded, spinning through a rotation technique that deflected the clones temporarily. Your chakra network should be sealed. You sealed the standard points, Naruto replied, his voice echoing from multiple positions as clones spoke in unison. But I don't use chakra like a standard ninja. I never have. The battle continued. Chapter 41, Breaking Point. The turning point came when Neji landed a clean hit. Despite Naruto's evasions, despite the clone distractions, the Hyuga prodigy was too skilled to be denied forever. A perfectly timed strike caught Naruto in the shoulder, sealing the tenketsu there, and sending a wave of numbness down his arm. Then another hit. And another. The 8 trigrams pattern closed around him, each strike building on the last until his entire right side was paralyzed. Naruto staggered, his clones dispersing as he lost the concentration to maintain them. This is the difference between us, Neji said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of vindication. You can struggle, you can fight, but in the end, fate always wins. I was born to be a genius. You were born to be a failure. Born to be. Naruto coughed blood, the internal damage from the gentle fist was accumulating. You think that's all there is? What we're born as? It's the only thing that matters. The main branch and the branch family. The gifted and the talentless. The winners and the losers. Neiji's smile was bitter, carrying years of resentment. Your struggles mean nothing against the destiny written in your blood. Then let me show you what my blood can do. Naruto reached deep. Past the standard chakra layer that the gentle fist had targeted. Past the deeper layer where his temporal ability resided. Down to something primal and red and ancient, the power he had felt once before, during his battle with Haku. The Kyuubi's chakra answered. Red energy surged through his system, burning away the blockages Neji had created, flooding his muscles with strength that no human should possess. The seal on his stomach glowed hot as it struggled to contain the demon's power, allowing only a fraction through, but that fraction was enough. Enough to heal. Enough to move. Enough to fight. Neiji's Byakugan widened with shock as he saw the chakra network he'd systematically destroyed rebuild itself in real time. What are you? I'm someone who refused to accept the destiny others chose for me. Naruto's voice carried echoes of something deeper, something that had been waiting for 12 years to speak. And I'm going to prove that you can do the same. He charged. Chapter 42, Victory. The final exchange was brutal and brief. Neji threw everything into his defense, rotation, gentle fist interceptions, every technique the Hyuga clan had developed over centuries of refinement. Against a normal opponent, any single measure would have been sufficient. Naruto wasn't normal. He combined his temporal ability with the Kyuubi's enhanced speed, creating a combat style that even the Byakugan couldn't fully track. Frozen moments allowed him to analyze and reposition. Demon chakra provided the power to exploit every opening. The Rasengan formed in his hand, crude, assisted by a clone, but stable enough for what he needed. Neji saw it coming. Tried to rotate it away. But the spiraling sphere wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the ground beneath his feet. The explosion of displaced earth sent Neji flying, his perfect stance destroyed by the loss of stable footing. He twisted in midair, trying to recover, but Naruto was already there, having frozen time the moment the Rasengan connected. When the stillness released, Naruto's fist was planted firmly in Neji's solar plexus. The Hyuga prodigy crashed to the arena floor and didn't rise. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto! The crowd exploded in cheers, some genuine, some shocked, all loud enough to make Naruto's recovering ears ring. He stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, his body aching from the strain of channeling demonic chakra, and looked down at his defeated opponent. "You're not bound by fate," he said, extending a hand toward Neji. "None of us are. The only chains that hold us are the ones we accept." For a long moment, Neji simply stared at the offered hand. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. Epilogue: The road ahead. The Chunin exam finals continued, but their conclusion was overshadowed by events beyond any genin's control. The invasion came during Sasuke's match against Gaara, an assault by sand and sound forces that had infiltrated the village under the guise of participating in the exams. The third Hokage fell in battle against Orochimaru, sacrificing himself to seal away his former students' arms and protect the village he had led for decades. Naruto fought in the invasion, using every skill he had developed to defend civilians and support Konoha's counterattack. His temporal ability proved devastating against the enemy forces, allowing him to neutralize threats before they could organize effective resistance. But the victory was hollow. The old man who had believed in him, who had given him the Shadow Clone Scroll and shared truths about his heritage, was gone. Konoha had survived, but at a cost that would be felt for years to come. In the aftermath, as the village rebuilt and mourned, Naruto stood before the Hokage monument and looked up at the faces carved into the mountainside. The first Hokage, who had founded the village. The second, who had built its institutions. The third, who had protected it through decades of war. The fourth, his father, who had died to save it from the Kyuubi. And one day, if he continued to grow, to train, to push past every limit that fate and circumstance tried to impose on him, his face might join theirs. The dream felt less distant now. Less impossible. The dead last academy student who couldn't perform a basic clone technique had become a genin who could stop time, who had defeated a Hyuga prodigy, who had helped defend his village against invasion. He wasn't the Hokage yet. Wasn't even close. There were years of work ahead, challenges he couldn't imagine, enemies who would make Neji and Orochimaru look like academy students. But he would face them. Every single one. Because that was what it meant to refuse the destiny others wrote for you. You didn't just reject the negative labels, the demon, the failure, the dead last. You also had to claim the positive ones. Hero. Protector. Leader. Hokage. Naruto touched the forehead protector on his brow, feeling the metal warm beneath his fingers, and smiled. The story was just beginning.